Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was the Black Sheep of the Uchiha Clan. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Are we there yet? No. Where are we going? I don't know. Thought you said that there was chaos where we were going. Those were not my exact words. Well, I thought that. Kisame. Itachi said the name in the same monotone as he said everything, but his blue-skinned partner knew to shut up then and there. I said that there is chaos wherever the Kyuubi has been, not that we were going to walk into a battlefield, the oldest known Uchiha stated. His partner looked down the road they were traveling on with a frown. All night they had been walking around talking to random people about any strange sightings, and all night they had been sent on one wild goose chase after another. From tales of a rogue Konoha patrol to an epic fight at the Valley of the End, the two had covered more ground in a few hours than they had the entire week prior. I'm just saying that maybe we're going about this the wrong way. Kisame mumbled low enough that Itachi didn't catch it. The shark nin knew better than to piss of a sleep-deprived Itachi. Said homicidal maniac didn't acknowledge his companion any further and instead continued walking down the road that would lead to their next clue. Several towns over they had heard about a large group of Konoha shinobi that had passed through the area and bought supplies. What made the group special is that the famous copy nin, Hitaki Kakashi, had been with them along with Sarutobi Asuma. Along with that, there was the fact that the Sarutobi Junin had been quite haggard looking. Now the Akatsuki duo was retracing that group's steps in order to try and find Uzumaki Naruto. Thanks to information from Zetsu, Itachi knew that Asuma and Kakashi were out looking for the Kyuubi vessel, and given the relationship of the former with it, they would not have gone back to Konoha without the boy. That left only one conclusion. Naruto and Kakashi had split ways on the trail back to Konoha. There was also the missing female, Mitarashi Anko, to be considered. She was most likely with the boy. This way, Itachi said aloud before plodding off into the trees by the side of the road. Kisame sighed and readjusted Samahata before following his partner. The former Kiri nin was surprised to see Itachi moving so far ahead as if he were onto something. Stopping a few feet from where his partner stopped, Kisame looked over the area. So, what is it? He asked when Itachi didn't say anything for several moments. The genius pointed off into the treetops. Last night, several shinobi came through here. Their leader was exceptional. I cannot tell where he actually moved, and I only know of his existence due to the footprints of the others, Itachi stated in his usual monotone, but the air was tense. Two of the others were talented as well. I would rank them as Junin. The other three were very sloppy, most likely Genin. Naruto was injured and went off in an easterly direction with the woman. Kisame let out a low whistle. That's pretty good. You can tell all of this from the way the trees have been moved. He asked. No, I can see the dry blood right there, and I figured that the shinobi that were most likely to get into a fight would be the Konoha group, and the one most likely to be injured would be the only missing Genin, who was the Kyuubi vessel. Since there was one more person that had started out with the group not accounted for, I assumed that she went with him. Kisame stared at Itachi for several moments before finally blinking. That's not what I was expecting, Kisame admitted. Itachi only walked farther into the woods with what Kisame could have sworn was an oversized magnifying glass and strange hat on his head. It was elementary. Slash dash 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 slash. Several miles away, blissfully unaware of the fact he was being stalked, Naruto yawned and pulled a pillow over his face to keep the sun off of his eyes. It didn't work, though, since he was already awake. With a yawn, the boy sat up in his bed and scratched his mop of hair lazily. It was only then he realized that he was actually in a bed when he was pretty sure he had fallen asleep out on the balcony with Anko. As he expected, the woman's bed was empty and she was nowhere to be seen. Wonder where she went, he asked himself as he fumbled out of bed. At least I got a good night of sleep without crazy teammates or snakes waking me up at ungodly hours. Yeah, don't get used to it, kid. It's not often I get a night's sleep like that, Anko admitted as she walked in the room with a tray of food. Most of it was cereal, but there were a few fruits there as well. Naruto grabbed an apple from the tray and took a small bite. With the reappearance of Anko, Naruto was reminded of their talk the night before and he felt the need to bring it up. Anko-chan. About last night. The special Junin cut him off with an exaggerated yawn. Yeah, last night. I really shouldn't get so drunk, Anko stated to the disbelieving Genin. Dango and whatever it was they were serving in that bar does not mix. But, you didn't go out last night, we stayed here and... Naruto trailed off at the very blank look Anko was giving him. Naruto wasn't ignorant. He knew what it meant and he hanged his head. Hi, hubby-chan, you shouldn't drink so much. Anko slowly nodded and without a word, took her breakfast and retreated to her own bed to eat it in silence. In an effort to somehow salvage the trip, the Junin decided to start a conversation. Oh, I heard something interesting, she stated in an even tone. Apparently, a famous missing nin was seen in the area a few days ago. Naruto did his best to remain stoic and quietly brood over the brush off Anko had just dealt him, but a small part of his personality demanded that any chance for adventure should be taken. Who? He asked in as enthusiastic voice as he could muster. Oh, no one special, Anko groused as she took another bite of her apple. When Naruto turned to actually look at her with a very inquisitive look, she finally grinned. Just the S-class missing nin from Kurigakure, Hoshigaki Kisame. S-class. Naruto shouted as he rushed for the bingo book he kept in his traveling pack. While he was leafing through it, Anko sighed. Naruto was still mad at her for not acknowledging what had happened the night before, but he would get over it. It's for the best, after all, she told herself with a resigned sigh. Naruto is still a naive little brat and he has no idea what would fall on him if he were to get seriously attached to me. Hubby-chan. Naruto yelled out with annoyance. The special Junin blinked rapidly as she shook herself out of her thoughts and turned her attention to the genin now standing in front of her bed. Is this the guy? Naruto asked once he saw his companion was back to reality. Anko took the offered book and looked over the entry Naruto had turned to. There, taking up an entire page in the bingo book, was a blue-skinned man with sharp, angular teeth grinning at the camera. That's him all right, the daimyo killer. Naruto scratched his head. Daimyo killer. What did he do? Well, Anko started as she leaned back on her pillows. They say that Kisame, along with a few other people from the Kiri no Shinobigatana Shichinen Shu, the seven swordsmen of the mist, raided the mansion of the governor of Hidden Mist. Kisame was the only one to actually make it past the daimyo's elite guard and he lopped off the man's head. The genin lifted his hand up to his neck subconsciously. Why did they do it? I mean, who are the seven swordsmen anyway? Naruto asked, now completely absorbed in the story. The seven swordsmen are the most elite shinobi in Kurigakure. In fact, the weakest of them would probably be up to Kakashi's speed. Two of them are missing nin, Kisame and another guy that's in the bingo book, Anko explained. As to why they killed a daimyo, word as he mentioned how the seven had botched a mission at a small party. Word got out about it so Kisame decided to kill him and run off. Naruto again looked at Kisami's picture with a frown. And how are we going to take this guy in? If he's that strong, we'd need a team to take him on. Anko blinked in realization. It was as if she had never gotten this far in her planning. I guess you have a point, brat. He is a bit rough, she admitted. Still, being Mitarashi Anko had its perks in being that there was nothing the purple-haired woman was really afraid of. We'll just cross that bridge when we come to it, she proudly declared. Come on, finish up breakfast and we'll get out of here. The genin watched as Anko practically marched out of the hotel room. She's trying too hard, Naruto quietly said to himself as he grabbed an orange for the road and followed her out after grabbing his pack. Down in the lobby, Anko had just finished paying the innkeeper for their room and was showing him a picture of Kisame. Naruto couldn't hear what she said to him, but the man shook his head and Anko sighed. What's wrong? Naruto asked when Anko walked over to him. I asked that guy if he's seen Kisame recently, the Junin responded as she and Naruto walked out the door into the street. The sun was just peeking over the horizon and people were beginning to start their day. Naruto took out a kunai and began to peel his orange. Do you really think an S-class criminal would just check into a hotel? He asked. Anko shook her head in response to the boy's question. It's the really strong ones that tend to be the most stupid. They think they're untouchable. How do you think I heard of him in the first place? He screwed up and was seen by a local trader in this town when he was on the road last night, she explained. As if considering her own words, she paused mid-step and looked out the corner of her eyes at Naruto. And you know, the Uchiha have a very bad habit of getting overconfident like that. Hey, don't group me with people who aren't even around anymore, Naruto said, offended. It didn't come out as impressive with his mouth full of orange, however. I didn't even grow up with them, you know. True, Anko admitted, but I saw what you did to that guy at the valley, that was some hardcore shit. The purple-haired woman had been looking for an excuse to bring up the main reason she had dragged Naruto away from going back to Konoha, and this looked like as good a time as any. Naruto's expression became downcast and defensive. They had it coming to them. They tried to kill the Hokage and they kidnapped me. Anko held up her hands in mock surrender. Did I say you acted out of line, brat? Hell no, I would have toasted those bastards too. I'm just saying that you had a bad run of it for your first real fight. Well, I only killed one of them, Naruto mumbled. Hey, so the old man got a little fun. Didn't know he still had it in him. Anko started to chuckle but Naruto shook his head to the negative. Tayuya killed the last one, I only helped a little, Naruto admitted in a somber voice. He still was having a bit of trouble with the death of Raijin. The purple-haired Junin scratched her head. Tayuya, that foul-mouthed little punk that was hanging all over you. She could actually fight? Anko asked in honest surprise. Naruto scoffed, glad to get past his involvement if only for a little while. She was better than I was. Hell, she attacked me first and I had to get a new Sharingan level just to escape, the genin said. Huh, it's always the ones you don't expect that turn out to be worth something, Anko mused. However, Naruto missed the sentiments and continued. And when she used that crazy jutsu, her power was incredible, Naruto whispered. That guy was still a threat, but I really thought just Yuya would just stamp him out when she got those crazy tattoos. Anko paused once again. Tattoos? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Naruto nodded his head. Yeah, jagged lines just popped up on her arms, legs, and neck. It was crazy, the boy stated, not noticing the way Anko's eyes had narrowed. He did, however, pick up on the small bits of killing instinct rolling off of her. What's wrong, hubby-chan? Nothing. Don't worry about it, Anko stated with a fake smile and continued walking. Naruto could tell something was up, but after what had happened that morning, he decided it was just another thing she wasn't going to tell him. Absent-mindedly, he pulled out a small book he had borrowed from the doctor's office he had visited the day before. Is that what I think it is? Anko asked when she saw the small orange book. Naruto innocently looked up at the taller woman with wide eyes. Why, hubby-chan, whatever are you talking about? He asked, still managing to sneak occasional glances at the Ika Ika Paradise book he was reading. Anko groaned. Do I even want to know how you, someone who was kidnapped in the middle of the night with only the clothes on his back, managed to get your perverted little hands on that book? Naruto grinned and went back to reading. I stole it from the doctor's office, he answered with a lecherous giggle. Wow, Anko blinked. I never pegged Dr. Kusanagi as an Ika Ika type, the Junin stated as she read over Naruto's shoulder. A few pages later, she decided to comment, no way anyone is that flexible. The blonde genin turned a more embarrassed shade of red at the comment. It's not supposed to be realistic. Putting her hand to her chin, Anko mused in pretend thought. So what's it for? Entertainment. Value for guys too immature to come up with their own mental picture. She asked. I remember you came up with some crazy stuff when I woke you up for your first mission a few months ago, she pointed out with a smirk. Naruto blushed and stuffed the book back into his pocket. Happy? He asked, slightly annoyed. He got even more annoyed when Anko openly laughed at him. Do I look like that Tenten girl you're used to? I don't care about that crap, she laughed. I'm just saying that anyone other than a shinobi couldn't pull off half the shit in that book without breaking something. The genin made a sour face and walked ahead of Anko. The two were already outside of the village they had spent the night in and the sun was high in the sky. Naruto looked back at Anko and smiled. Tenten, he said, scratching his head. And I guess it's good that all the girls I know are shinobi, huh? Naruto asked as he stuck out his tongue at the older woman. Anko blinked at the boy as he hurried around the road. What the hell? You're turning into a much bigger pervert than that uncle of yours. She yelled out as she chased the hysterically laughing boy. With a second, more malevolent duo, the mood was anything but jovial as Uchiha Itachi stooped in low to the ground. The red-eyed teen got closer and closer until his eyeball was almost touching the dirt beneath his gaze. Behind him, Kisame sighed. Itachi-san, what is the point of this? He asked. The former Kiri nin was hot, hungry, and tired from searching all night. I can smell a town near here, can't we rest some? He asked. They might have poke. Itachi perked up a bit when his favorite treat was mentioned, but he didn't show any outward signs of it. They went this way, the Uchiha said as he pointed in a random direction. Kisame heaved Samahata back onto his shoulder and followed his partner. This is the way to the town, you know, he pointed out with a sharky smirk. It's a coincidence, Itachi stated in his usual monotone. It was obvious to both that while the trail did lead into the town, the main reason for going was the chocolatey treat Itachi craved. It was almost noon when the two Akatsuki entered the hamlet. The people were busy in the streets loading up goods to take to Konoha and other villages for trade, so the trail Itachi had been following was effectively beyond his detection unless he had access to a nin dog. Kisame, who had used a minor genjutsu on Samahata to make it look like a regular katana resting on his back, scratched his head. Now what, Itachi-san? He asked. His stomach was rumbling and he could practically taste the food being cooked in a nearby inn dinner. The Uchiha heir tilted his head slightly. Get supplies and ask around because the Kyuubi definitely stopped here for the night, he stated in his usual eerie voice. Kisame, happy that the old, crazy, Itachi had made an appearance, turned to agree with his companion only to find him missing. Where did he go? Kisame wondered before groaning when he saw a familiar figure dart into the nearest candy store. I'm starting to think he killed his family because they ate the last bit of Pocky. That said, the tall missing nin quickly ran into the hotel's dinner to fill his own rumbling stomach. Unlike his partner, Kisame actually managed to have a bit of self-control as he walked through the lobby of the hotel and headed to the sitting area. A young girl, obviously unnerved by his presence, led him to an out-of-the-way booth and gave him a menu. So many good things on here. Kisame mused. Finally, He handed the menu back and smirked at the serving girl. Can't decide, just bring everything you have. The serving girl looked at Kisame with wide eyes. Everything? She asked. When Kisame nodded, she mumbled something about the kitchen not taking the stress and wandered off towards the back. Such good service here, Kisame mused. Usually, he had to bust a few skulls before people would serve him with his looks. Excuse me, the owner of the inn came over to the table and bowed. Are you not Hoshigaki Kisame? This caught the Akatsuki's attention. How do you know that name? He asked in a tone that brokered no excuses. No one knew his name outside of Anbu squads, certainly not some bum innkeeper. The old man eeped and hid behind the serving tray he was holding. PP, please don't kill me, he begged. Kisame easily picked him up by the cuff of his shirt. I won't if you give me the information, he stated. Now, tell me how you know that name. Two people were in here this morning. A young boy and a woman, they were Konoha ninja. The man shouted. They showed me a picture and asked if you were around. I swear that's all I know. The cloaked missing nin dropped the owner and heaved his massive sword back onto his shoulder. Damn, looks like I won't be getting that meal after all. Which way did they go? The old owner pointed out one of the windows. They followed the road towards tea country. Please leave me alone. Kisame viciously smiled and started going through hand seals. No can do, you know who I am. Sweden. Bakusui Shoha. Itachi walked out of his Pocky shop with a slight spring in his step. Under his arm he had several boxes of the tasty treats and he was feeling rather content with himself. That was, until, he looked up at the enormous wave bearing down on him and the rest of the city. Shit. The water wall hit with such force that the houses practically exploded into splinters with their occupants inside. On the streets, people were mowed down by the water as they went about their business. Their deaths were so swift that only the ones that were facing the small inn where it had originated saw it coming. Itachi, being the superior shinobi he was, managed to shunshin to the top of the Pocky shop where he proceeded to flee the destruction. When he heard the shop he had just exited get crushed behind him, he sighed. All that Pocky. Wasted. Further back, riding out the destruction like a surfer, Kisame directed the water as it decimated the small town. He knew Itachi was down there somewhere but he trusted his partner's ability to avoid a watery death. And if he doesn't, I always get his stuff. It's a win-win. The shark man laughed. He always did like Itachi's stereo. What's a win-win, Kisame? The Kiri nin looked over at the slightly wet Uchiha with a small smile. Ah, hey there. Get your Pocky, he asked, changing the subject. Itachi held up the boxes he managed to save from Kisami's watergeddon. You destroyed the shop, though, the cold tone was enough to let the other missing nin know Itachi was displeased. Ah, I had to. Kisame quickly defended. Someone knew my name here, who knew how many people he told. The Uchiha hemmed and nodded. Very well, the town was a risk if that was the case. Tell me, though, how did they know of you here? We are well outside of Kiri. My guess is that it was that Kyubi brat and the woman he's with who told them. The innkeeper said they were Leaf Nin, Kisame responded. Finally, the waters started to recede and the two homeless shinobi floated down to the muddy ground below. Before them, there was a blank space of land that was easily the size of a small city, let alone the town that had been sitting there before. It was washed clean. Kisame surveyed his work with a smug smirk. Ah, the old guy said they went this way, Itachi-san, the former Kiri nin stated as he pointed to a road on the other side of the clearing. Itachi didn't say anything in response at first and instead simply started walking. Once they were actually to the road, Itachi's eye focused on several sets of tracks. We are only an hour behind them, Kisame, he said. Why were they asking about you? Ah, didn't think to ask that, Kisame admitted. Oh, maybe they want that bounty that's still on my head. The old guy said they had a picture of me in a little book. You have a bounty? Itachi asked, pausing in the middle of the road for a moment. There was only the smallest hint of curiosity in his voice, but it was there. How much? Kisame glanced sidelong at his partner with an even look. 10 million ryu. Why? Itachi continued walking. No reason, he lied. Kisame could have sworn he heard Itachi mumble something about small fry, but he couldn't be certain. In a louder voice, Itachi said, I have an idea, Kisame. We're going to let the Kyubi catch his fish, no pun intended, of course. Kisame sighed. For someone who hardly ever spoke, Itachi had a smart mouth when he decided to open it. Slash dash 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 slash. Enko, are you sure you know where we're going? Naruto asked once again as he pushed through the thick underbrush that they were currently traveling through. The young woman shrugged. The next town is this way and that's as good a place to go as any, Enko stated. Naruto shrugged. That sounded reasonable enough for him. How do you know this place so well? He asked, trying to strike up a conversation. It was back with my old Junin instructor, Enko reluctantly stated, and the conversation was closed. The genin sneered and dropped the subject. She doesn't trust me anymore, he reminded himself as he continued along. Behind him, Enko looked at him with a resigned face. She knew very well that Naruto was still upset about the night before, but she had resigned herself to protecting him even at the cost of her friendship with the boy. After all, most of the village still hated her for her dealings with Orochimaru. Only Naruto's relation to Kakashi kept some of the more influential people at bay in regards to her relationship with Naruto. Still, I can be there for him as a teacher until he just forgets me, Enko decided. I'll do better by him than my teacher did with me. Suddenly, the sound of someone strumming an instrument floated by on the wind. It was such a surprising thing that Naruto and Enko stopped cold. Enko immediately drew a kunai and eased her footsteps so that she literally made no sound on the forest floor. When Naruto looked back at her, she signed orders using Konoha's standard sign language. Surround and scout. The genin nodded and the two separated, with each going into a sweeping arc away from one another. The strange music continued, however, so the two shinobi crept closer through the trees. Finally, the pair came to a clearing in which there was a figure in a dark robe with red clouds strumming on a lute. Oh, his head was a strange straw hat, and off to the side were numerous empty bottles of whiskey. If Naruto and Enko weren't confused, Kisame was confused enough for the both of them. What the hell is Itachi doing? He asked himself as he strummed a few more keys on an instrument he had no idea how to play. Oh no, we can't just grab the kid and kill the woman. Itachi has to make some over-elaborate plan that could fall apart at the drop of a hat. Kisame, of course, knew exactly where Naruto and Enko were. The boy was being incredibly clumsy and the woman was only marginally better when compared to someone of his caliber. The Akatsuki member also knew where his partner was, waiting to make his dramatic entrance. Why can't I ever make a dramatic entrance? Enko raised an eye at the drunken way the lute player was acting. With all the bottles laying around, he should be out cold. That means he's a shinobi, she mused, as only someone with some sort of body conditioning could take that much alcohol. Suddenly, the figure slumped over onto his side like a dead body. His hat rolled off his head and revealed the distinctive face of Hoshigaki Kisame snoring like a punch-drunk baby. There was even a tiny bit of drool coming from his mouth. What the hell? That's Kisame, Enko thought as she watched the figure in the distance. There's something seriously wrong, this is too convenient. Naruto, however, wasn't nearly as cautious, having never actually been around shinobi like Kisame before. As such, the young genin carefully walked out of hiding and into the clearing. Enko's eyes narrowed as she watched the former Kiri nin sleep off his drunkenness. When the man didn't make any moves in response to Naruto coming out of hiding, she relaxed just a little. Maybe he's just overrated, getting drunk in the middle of nowhere. Still, as a precaution, Enko bit her thumb and ran through a set of seals. Down in the clearing where Kisame was sleeping off his stupor, Naruto pulled out a kunai and slowly walked forward. He knew Enko was still around and that she was just being cautious, but the missing nin was out like a light in his opinion. Getting bolder with every step, Naruto practically strolled up to Kisame and put the kunai he was holding the fishy man's throat. That was his cue for all hell to break loose. The sudden sound of a crow cawing caught Naruto's attention and caused the boy to quickly turn around. The large bird was standing around 10 feet away and staring dead at the genin. As if the caw had been a signal, more and more birds started to flock to the clearing. Soon, there was a veritable flock of large, black, birds all staring at Naruto. Said genin was justifiably getting freaked out. Damn, that's a lot of birds, Naruto said to himself. More than be startled by them, though, the blonde was worried that their cawing would wake Kisame. Go on, he harshly whispered, hoping they would get frightened and fly away. The birds, however, did just the opposite. Instead of being frightened, they waddled closer as a group. Finally, Naruto decided enough was enough. Taking careful aim at the center of the flock, the genin sent his kunai flying. That should scare them off, he thought. So sure was he that the next sting of events came as a much larger shock to his system. From the center of the flock, a hand seemingly appeared from the sea of dark feathers and deftly caught the weapon. The crows started to crow madly and trash around, their feathers flying everywhere. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as an army soon joined the hand rising slowly from the mass of birds. By now their crowing had reached a new crescendo of shrillness, as if being spurned on by this apparition in their midst. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the crows took flight. Hundreds, maybe even thousands, of the death black birds filled the space before Naruto. The impossible number of avians formed a seemingly solid wall of black now ripped through the clearing. By now, the blonde boy had lost all thoughts of Kisame and was focused solely on the dark legion before him. Then, in the swirling maelstrom of feathers and tortured shrieks, a new presence made itself known. As if emerging from the gaping maw of hell itself, a set of red eyes opened in the darkness and all at once, everything stopped. The birds, now frozen in place, bore silent witness to the figure stepping out of their number, his silhouette a grim profile in their malevolent legion. Dressed head to toe in a sweeping cloak, the young man stalked silently towards his prey. His piercing red eyes instantly focused on Naruto's and the world instantly started breathing again. Naruto-kun, the figure said once the last crow had disappeared. You will come with me. The younger Uchiha started to breathe in short, panicked breaths. Itachi. Naruto managed to gasp. The killer of the entire Uchiha clan was standing before him and the killing intent rolling off of him was staggering. It was all Naruto could do to breath. It was then something seemingly clicked with the raven-haired youth. This was the same boy he had watched the last Chunin exam with before he had left. That sudden lapse of concentration would prove to be a problem, however. Kuchio's no jutsu. Itachi leapt up into the air as the massive tail of a purple serpent slammed into the ground where he had been standing. The Akatsuki member didn't seem too concerned with it, though, as he watched stoically from his new perch in a nearby tree. The summoned snake slithered out from the forest and interposed itself between Naruto and the renegade Uchiha with something akin to a scowl. After all, most snake users didn't use their talents for protection. Anko-san, it's good to see you again, Itachi stated as he easily knocked several kunai out of the air that were aimed at his head. Back behind the guardian Anko had summoned for him, Naruto was trying to regain his wits. What's Itachi doing here? The boy asked aloud. Did he come to finish the job or something else? Ah, that's a big snake. Naruto turned around and zeroed in on the voice. Kisame rose to his feet and cracked a few bones in his arm, trying to get the kinks out of it. Itachi sure is taking his time with this one, he mumbled, picking Samahata back up off the ground and brushing it off. Still aren't running yet, kid. The blonde took a step back and felt his back hit the scales of the snake guarding him. The small action got the beast's attention and Kisame soon found himself face to face with an aggravated, two-story, reptile. Oh, what have we here? Kisame asked with a vicious smirk. I wonder if your scales can stand up to my Samahata. The genin watched in sheer amazement as the shark man seemingly signed his own death warrant by launching himself at the massive summoned animal. Fangs bared, the serpent reacted with a strike of its own and its open mouth easily swallowed the comparatively small Kisame. Well, that was anticlimactic, Naruto stated. When the snake groaned, the boy tilted his head in confusion. What's wrong? Don't like seafood. Even if the snake could respond to the bad joke, its opinion was rendered moot as the massive blade of Samahata sprouted from the top of its skull. The reptile thrashed around in spasms, wrecking trees and forcing Naruto to make a break for cover. Finally, the beast toppled over, its mouth agape in muted horror. Something inside the creature's skull moved around and the Zanbedu was yanked from where it was wedged before a blue hand ripped open the snake's jaw. Gods, that thing smells worse inside than it did outside, Kisame sputtered in disgust as he calmly walked out of the creature's mouth. Other than a ruined overcoat, the missing nin looked none the worse from his attack. Naruto nearly lost his grip on the tree limb he was sitting on when the giant summon poofed out of existence. Something that big was supposed to last longer than one attack. A loud crash coming from the other side of the clearing caught his and Kisami's attention. From the foliage, Itachi calmly dragged an unconscious Anko out into the field and looked directly at Naruto's hiding place. Uzumaki Naruto, come out or I kill your teacher, the young man stated in ruthless monotone. Naruto weighed his options. He could run and maybe escape, but he doubted it. Itachi had destroyed the most talented clans in Konoha by himself in a single night. No way he'd lose a genin in a game of cat and mouse. On the other hand, Anko was out cold. It was obvious from the amount of blood coming from beyond her hairline that a blow on the head had done the deed so she wouldn't be up anytime soon. With Itachi standing over her as he was, there was no chance of rescuing her and making an escape. None at all. Actually, there was really no decision to make in his mind. With a scowl, Naruto walked out of the tree line with his hands up. Kisame busted out with a deep laugh once he caught the look on Naruto's face. What's with the look, brat? You look like someone took your favorite toy. Uzumaki Naruto, you will come with us, Itachi ordered, ignoring his partner. If you resist, I will kill the woman. Naruto's scowl deepened. Let her go and I'll go with you. Hey, Kisame heaved his massive Zanbetu off of his shoulder and pointed it threateningly at the genin. Getting pretty mouthy for a prisoner. Want me to grind your face into sandpaper with my Samahata? Kisame, Itachi called out as a warning. The Kiri nin snorted and re-shouldered his sword. He still felt the need to condescendingly smile at Naruto, though. The genin let out the breath he hadn't noticed he was holding when Kisame took a step back. As much as the thought galled him, there was no way he could defend himself against someone of that caliber in this situation. Itachi took away the kunai he had been holding to Anko's throat and let go of her hair. Naruto watched in despair as the Junin's head limply fell to the ground without so much as a stir. Not caring about what Itachi would do, the boy ran over to his teacher. Anko. Anko. Naruto lightly shook the woman. She was breathing but the breaths were ragged. One of her eyes was swollen shut as well. Still, the kunoichi managed to crack open her working eye and put on a sloppy grin. Brat, why are you still here? She rasped. Naruto started shaking when he saw the extent of Anko's injuries and he wheeled around on Itachi with his teeth bared like a wild animal. You'll pay for this. He yelled as his eyes flashed red. He was too far gone to listen to the part of his mind that was screaming out to him. Ho, little kid thinks he can play with the big boys. Kisame laughed as he moved forward, Samahata barred. Itachi, however, had frozen once he saw Naruto's face. Kisame didn't see the first blow coming. Naruto's foot had lashed out with pinpoint accuracy and caught the shinobi square in the jaw. Then, with moves chained together faster than the Sharkman could react, Naruto had slammed his hands down on the ground in a handstand and was launching kick after kick into Kisame's gut. With a growl, the former Kiri-nin used his free hand to grab Naruto's leg with the full intention to snap it like a twig. However, the sudden weight he felt himself holding made him look down with wide eyes. Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu. Kisame instantly brought Samahata up to guard himself against the desperate fireball, dropping Naruto in the process. The fireball wasn't as large as Naruto had hoped it would have been, there wasn't time to convert enough chakra to fire, but it had the desired effect. Kisame was too busy putting out his coat to give chase so Naruto headed towards the main threat, Itachi. If the older Uchiha was surprised at this course of action, he certainly didn't show it as he brought his kunai up to block Naruto's attack. With Anko only laying a few feet away, Naruto pulled out all the stops and pressed on with all of his might. Not giving an inch, Itachi also pushed back with similar results. Feats of strength weren't really his forte, anyway. Still, it was enough to keep the fight still for a moment longer. Those eyes, they are the Sharingan, Itachi stated aloud. How did you get them? Who was your father, I wonder? Naruto pulled out the kunai he had been hiding in his coat sleeve and took a swipe at Itachi's flank. While it didn't hit, the strike did force the missing nin to jump back, leaving an opening for Naruto to advance inside Itachi's guard. The two-tone Sharingan in Naruto's eyes spun wildly as the boy struck with unrivaled precision. However, the gap between Genin and former Anbu leader was too much to bridge. As if he were fighting a child, Itachi dropped his kunai and instantly grabbed both of Naruto's hands as they came in for killing blows. Not enough, the teen stated. Your Sharingan is not advanced enough to match the power of my eyes. Tell me who your father was, the older boy demanded. Naruto wasn't listening. Using the same maneuver he had used against Kisame, the blonde used Itachi's hands as a platform to gain enough leverage to launch his leg upwards. Itachi blocked the knee strike with his own knee and, taking the blatant opportunity, headbutted Naruto's skull. He followed up with a few quick shots to the boy's ribs and sent him stumbling backwards. Is that the limit of your abilities? Itachi asked, his voice a cold monotone wrapped in disappointment. Perhaps you are only a mongrel of diluted blood. How saddening that you are our target. You killed my entire family and you say that. Naruto roared as he fought to keep his balance. Opposite him, Itachi only stared back with a dull, listless stare. The unacknowledgement set the boy off once again and he charged back into melee range. The blows, bolstered by the Sharingan, were fast, accurate, and always poking at perceived weak spots. However, Itachi's blocks were always directly in place to the point where Naruto was starting to believe Itachi could somehow guess where he was going to hit. This is pathetic, Itachi declared as he batted away punch after punch. Off to the side he could see Kisame finally put himself out and was looking none too pleased. In fact, the Sharkman looked absolutely murderous. Itachi knew his partner wouldn't act, though, since it was obvious that he was just playing with his opponent. Naruto launched a particularly vicious kick in response and left himself too open once again. His foot was easily caught by the Uchiha prodigy and the taller boy hit the back of Naruto's knee. The blow contained such force that after he had been dropped to the ground, Naruto's leg continued to spasm and could no longer hold any weight. He could hear Kisame laughing somewhere behind him and small sigh Itachi gave at his quick defeat. However, the only thing that registered to Naruto at the moment was the absolutely blinding pain in his knee joint. Like a wounded animal, he rolled around on the ground, grasping at his leg. It was such a precise strike, something he should have expected a Junin to use. Naruto was forced to stop rolling around when his back hit something soft that groaned. OWW. Damn brat, Anko moaned, still not fully conscious, before coughing and going silent once again. The words, few as they were, cut through the haze of anger and pain in Naruto's mind. They were an anchor, a base, for the small rational side that had stayed untainted. Sorry, Anko-san, Naruto whispered. It was something that he would never want to do, cause pain to one of his most precious people. With Itachi now advancing on him, time was running out. He had to get Anko away from this place, even if it kills me. Itachi slightly shook his head when he looked at the prone form of his long-lost relative. You must have been of low stock if this is your limit. Now, your life is forfeit due to your own inadequacies. You will come with us and then you will die. It's what's going to happen regardless of what you do here. I won't let you. Itachi watched as Naruto struggled to his feet. His leg looked close to buckling under him, but his sheer will was holding it in place, it seemed. As I said, you don't have a choice, Itachi repeated. You will. Shut up, Naruto barked. His eyes were razor sharp despite the way his body looked. I don't care what happens to my body, my bones, or even my life. You won't touch Anko or I'll kill you. Kisame blinked at the small kid. Was he really serious? Did he have any idea what was going to happen to him? Itachi-san, I think we should cut off a few body parts, maybe start with his tongue, the man joked. However, Itachi and Naruto were completely ignoring him, lost in their own battle of wills. The renegade Uchiha's eyes had narrowed to a dangerous degree and he was staring a hole in Naruto's head. If looks could kill, Itachi's piercing gaze would have reduced his opponent to cinders. Likewise, Naruto was dead set on carrying through with his statement. Everything he had done in his life had been through the help of the people around him, they had always protected him. It had been his grandfather who had saved him last time at the cost of leaving the village along with everyone dear to him. They had risked their very lives for his and now it was time to return the favor. Anko-chan, let me protect you this time. With a deep breath, Naruto slammed his leg down hard into the ground. Itachi was mildly impressed when he heard the pop of the boy's knee going back into place. He honestly didn't think Naruto was capable of something like that. It seemed the display caught Kisame's attention as well since the tall man stopped his advance. Now face to face, will to will, Itachi and Naruto continued their staring death match. It was Naruto who blinked first. Kaden. Hosenka no Jutsu. Itachi broke into a run to escape the powerful orbs of flaming death coming after him and easily kept out of their reach through the use of his Sharingan. Suddenly, from the side and the front, two Narutos came barreling at him while the third continued to breathe fireballs. His Sharingan quickly saw that they were mere bunshin, but he decided to play with Naruto for a little longer. Breaking to the left to avoid the first clone, Itachi pulled out a kunai and ran straight for the fire-spitting Naruto. Again dodging the jutsu, he quickly got into the real Naruto's guard and sent the sleek piece of metal screaming into the stunned Genin's shoulder. With a pop, the stabbed bunshin disappeared leaving Itachi alone in the clearing. However, the Junin wasn't about to be caught sleeping. Before Naruto's uppercut even broke the surface of the ground, the Uchiha was already in the air, leaping out of range. When he brushed himself off, Naruto looked slightly pensive now that his plan hadn't worked. That was impressive, Naruto-kun, Itachi stated, standing inside of your bunshin so the Sharingan couldn't tell it was a clone until the last moment. Even putting a small concealment genjutsu within its chakra to cover the hole you had dropped down into. I underestimated you. Naruto didn't look happy at the praise. This isn't over, he shouted, sounding somewhat unnerved. He needed an edge, something that would at least give him a handicap. It was a pain that he didn't have any of his standard tools with him. His former kidnappers had disarmed him earlier, and Anko had only provided him with his spare coat and a few kunai. This coat feels heavy, though, Naruto suddenly realized. Subtly, even though he was pretty sure Itachi could see what he was doing, Naruto felt around inside the piece of clothing for something, anything, that was hidden there. A few kunai, needles, and maybe a smoke bomb was what he found in the pockets. There was something heavy inside the lining of the coat, where he would usually keep spare weapons, and it was defiantly metal, long, and heavy. The Kusari Fundo. Naruto suddenly realized. Anko must have brought it along with her and just forgot to mention it. Always could count on Anko's paranoia when it came to being unarmed. But would it be enough to deal with Itachi long enough to escape? Looking at his face, Naruto couldn't tell if the other Uchiha was getting impatient or not, so who knew when Itachi would just up and attack. I have to try, Naruto told himself. What else could he do? His fire jutsu, the only large-scale attacks he had, were all probably known and mastered by Itachi himself. This was the only thing he had that Itachi probably didn't know about, so he would have to use it. Carefully, Naruto pulled back out his hand with the smoke bomb inside. If his opponent knew what it was beforehand, there would be no way to make up for the loss of surprise. Itachi made his mistake when he blinked. Naruto's eyes caught the small action and he acted. Strangely, the missing nin didn't try to dodge the ball even as it was flying towards him, but the genin didn't care. The plume of purple smoke enveloped the area and Naruto ripped the length of chain from his coat. Mugen Kusari no Jutsu. With a burst of chakra flowing through it, the Kusari Fundo reached incredible lengths as it snaked through the air, circling the smoke in a split second. Not even bothering to breath, Naruto directed the chain to constrict into the smoke, praying he caught other Uchiha. The atmosphere was tense with tension as the chain pulled taut. Naruto's sandals dug into the earth as he braced himself and pulled on the chain. The resistance was negligible, to Naruto's surprise, as a bound Itachi appeared from the smoke, stoic expression still firmly in place on his face. Now you pay. Naruto shouted, forming seals in his hands as best he could while holding the chain. You're going to pay for my family, me, and most of all, Anko. Raiden. Denryu no Jutsu. The purloined jutsu worked immediately as hundreds of volts were sent into the Kusari Fundo. With only one place to go, the raw power ripped into the bound Itachi with a sickening sizzling sound filling the air. Seeing Itachi fall over, Naruto stumbled back before falling to the ground with a wince. Still not completely recovered from his earlier injuries, the boy was wiped out after this assault. I still made you pay, he heaved, sparing the charred body of Itachi another look. Former success turned to horror, however, when the body was no longer where it should have been. There was a light cloud of smoke hovering over the spot and Naruto immediately knew what happened. Again you impress me, Naruto-kun. Naruto didn't even have to turn around to know Itachi was standing unscathed behind him. Kage Bunshin, I didn't even see you do it, he gasped as he rubbed his eyes. Your Sharingan is not fully developed. Even if it can copy jutsu, it cannot register faster than sight movements yet, the older Uchiha stated. Now, you will come with us or Anko-san will die and you will still come with us. What the hell do you want with me? Naruto yelled, using his last bit of energy to shuffle around to face Itachi and Kisame. Do you want to finish the job so you'll be the only Uchiha left? Is that it? Kisame laughed and leaned forward, his arms resting on the Samahata's hilt. We don't want anything with you, kid. We want the overgrown ball of fluff inside you. When Naruto's face only registered confusion, Itachi blinked. Could the village not have told you yet? He asked himself more than anyone else. A tug on his cloak made him look down and broke him out of his thoughts. Don't tell him, Anko pleaded. You don't need to do this. The Uchiha looked down at the woman as if she were dirt on the bottom of his shoe. Anko-san, you are not important to this conversation, he stated. His voice was still cordial but there was an obvious edge to it. Told me what? Naruto asked, trying to buy time and take Itachi's attention off of Anko. It seemed to work as Itachi seemed to ignore Anko's efforts. Itachi stared at his long-lost relative for a few moments as if he were looking at a child that walked into an adult conversation. That you have a monster inside of you, he suddenly stated. A monster, Naruto repeated. How could something be inside of him? What are you talking about? What kind of monster? I remember it, Itachi mused instead of outright answering, when it attacked Konoha. There was no warning, no time to prepare. All of my Anbu division was killed by it. Even the Hokage could not fight it without great loss. Anko's efforts intensified as she struggled to crawl up Itachi's coat with nothing but sheer will. I won't let you, she croaked. Itachi merely kicked her away like a piece of trash and continued. The monster killed over half of our shinobi forces and the yellow flash, yet we could not even kill it, we had to seal it. Naruto's eyes went wide with understanding. But the Kyuubi killed the fourth, does that mean? I'm sure you've seen it, the seal on your stomach, Itachi stated, pointing to the boy. Have you never wondered what it was? It's the seal the fourth gave his life to make. The very seal that keeps the demon fox bound to this mortal world. Naruto put a hand on his stomach. It was impossible that something like that could be sealed inside of him without him knowing, wasn't it? I'm the Kyuubi. My mother, oh god. No, you are not the Kyuubi. Anko yelled, coughing up speckles of blood. Her voice was clear, though, and it cut through the haze of Naruto's mind. The voice was a lifeline to the shattered genin. He grasped it like a man dying of thirst would grasp a glass of water. On the brink of tears, he looked up at the serious face of Mitarashi Anko. You are not the Kyuubi, the woman said, locking eyes with the teen. The Kyuubi was a merciless monster with no remorse. It killed hundreds, thousands of people without any regard for anything other than its own will. Then, with a softer voice and expression, she smiled in quiet way that was out of place on her normally mischievous face. You are Naruto, shinobi of Konoha, grandson of the Hokage, promising genin, and the only person I have ever put my complete trust in. I didn't realize it, but you are the only person that makes me feel truly alive, like I did before I gave my childhood away. You will never be a monster to me, she admitted with a slightly shamed expression. I've seen real monsters and you, Naruto, are as far from one as humanly possible. Naruto sniffed a few more times and wiped the tears from his face. Anko gave him one of her trademark smirks and he mirrored the expression as best he could. He realized that even if he was a monster, it wouldn't matter as long as he was only measured by how Anko saw him. That opinion alone was the only thing he had ever cared about. Mitarashi Anko was his measure of existence, not the man standing before him. Itachi showed no emotion as Naruto struggled to his feet. I don't care what you want from me. The boy rasped. I won't be a pawn to you. Ho, this is one tough brat, Kisame appraised, his voice for once not the usual drawl. After all that he's ready to go again. You got guts, kid. Naruto pulled a kunai from the sleeve of his coat and watched the two people before him. He had virtually no strength left, but that wouldn't stop him. Suddenly, Anko sprang to life. Kisame, obviously caught off guard, let out a groan as for the second time in a single fight he was kicked in the head. The snake Junin used the shark's head as a platform to launch herself at Itachi, who was still oddly calm. Anko let out a scream as a kunai pushed its way through her neck. Itachi had moved before either Naruto or herself could react. Anko, Naruto yelled, gripping his kunai in disbelief. I'll kill you for this, you bastard. Itachi ignored the impassioned outburst. It seems you were holding something back during our fight, Anko-san, the Uchiha stated as the woman impaled on his kunai transformed into a writhing mass of snakes. They snakes quickly wrapped themselves around the missing nin's arms and Itachi's eyes moved over to the side where Kisame was still rubbing his head. You were holding back quite a bit. Naruto followed Itachi's eyes and watched in shock as Anko eerily emerged from the very ground itself behind the former Kiri nin. Kisami's smirk turned feral as he felt the cold steel on his neck. Now, you will let Naruto go or I slit your partner's throat, Anko said in a slow, deliberate tone as she licked her lips. I would just hate to spill such rich blood on the ground. What a waste it would be. Just like that old snake, Orochimaru, Kisame spat. If I get kicked in the head one more time, I'll get myself a new pair of snake skin boots. His eye twitched when he felt the tip of Anko's kunai push itself into his skin and he wisely remained silent. Itachi lazily looked at the mass of snakes coiled around him. These are very poisonous, he observed, seemingly unconcerned with his predicament. You should be careful with them around children. Anko's sadistic smile turned to horror as she felt something press into her back. She didn't have to turn around to know Itachi was now somehow behind her holding a blade to her spine. Wah! Ah! Naruto yelled as he felt something slithering around on him. To his alarm, he was covered in snakes from foot to neck and none of them looked particularly happy. Anko. Anko slowly lowered her kunai from Kisami's neck with a sigh. Sharingan, she groaned, what a cheap bloodline. Kisame, now away from potential injury, laughed at Anko's characterization. That's a new one. I've heard. Amazing. Terrifying. And, godlike, but never, cheap. Itachi ignored his partner and roughly pushed Anko towards Naruto. Now, have you both had your fill of resisting? You must realize how patient I've been up until now. Anko's eyes flashed in defiance. Sorry for the inconvenience. Itachi easily blocked the reverse kick aimed at his groin with his knee. This action did allow Anko to leap away from him and over to Naruto, however. She dismissed the snakes, much to Naruto's relief. Naruto, she said, making sure to keep her face expressionless. Her lips weren't moving to form the words she was saying, but random words most likely to throw Itachi's eyes off from reading her lips. I'll distract them for as long as I can while you run. Don't look back, don't try to help. Got that? They'll kill you, Naruto whispered. He couldn't believe what Anko was saying. We can both run. Come on. Anko turned her head to smile at Naruto. Ah, I won't die here, brat. So, Naruto let out a yelp as he was picked up like a sack of rice. Get going. As he was flying through the air after being thrown by Anko, Naruto watched in horror as she darted towards the two S-class criminals. There was no way she could hope to last against them. Why do people keep getting hurt for me? Naruto asked himself as he landed hard on the ground, several yards away from the one-sided fight. He started shaking when Kisame landed a hard hit into Anko's gut. They were just toying with her. Because you are weak by yourself. Naruto's blood ran cold as the voice boomed in his mind. It was all-consuming and all-encompassing, boring into his fear-laced conscience until there was only the void of the mind and the voice. The genin looked around at the familiar throne room he once again found himself in. This is where the creature from before had saved him, albeit with a price, from Tayuya. What do you want? Naruto asked, looking at the back of the room at the massive throne. On it, the same dark figure from before sat motionless. There was a chuckle, low and foreboding, from the creature. Naruto got the impression it was laughing more at the situation than at him, but the boy couldn't be certain. Regardless, it was deriving a great deal of amusement from something. I should ask you that, boy. It said. What is it you desire? What would you be willing to give up for your wishes? Naruto fell back on the floor, exhausted. Yes. The creature drawled, a secret smile etched on its hideous face. Naruto gulped. He knew he already owed this thing a favor from before. How much more was he willing to give? What could he give? I want this all to end, Naruto finally stated. I want to go back to Konoha with Anko, without any problems. Oh, that is not a light request, the creature laughed, obviously intrigued by the wish. The cost for such a thing would be great. Can you, a mere child, comprehend what debt is? You can have it all. The boy shouted. Anything you want, just don't let Anko die. She means. The creature held up a claw from the darkness, cutting Naruto off. That is enough. It shall be done as you desire, but the cost will be great. One day you will have to serve me. You will not get a choice which day this shall be, but you will obey me. Do you understand? Yes, Naruto shouted, more aware of how long this was taking. If Anko were to die while he was making small talk with some creature from a partial reality. Please, just do it. The being smirked as he waved his hand in an apparent dismissal. It is done. Go and never forget your debt. I asked for your service one day. Naruto nodded with the last bit of his strength, finally falling into unconsciousness. The creature on the throne smirked as the boy faded away, leaving him alone in his throne room. And now there are 3. My army is growing, would you say? Behind the throne, a small fox narrowed its eyes. One day this demon wouldn't be in control. On that day, he'd rip open this little pocket dimension and eat the creature himself. After all, Tengu weren't the only creatures known for their cunning. Anko grunted as another jab caught her in the ribs. She tried to block the follow-up uppercut, but she was thrown back by the force Kisame had put into it. The current situation was quite pathetic, in Anko's opinion. Not only was she on the complete defensive against an opponent who was certainly not serious and alone, Itachi was content to just watch his partner beat the shit out of her. Naruto was out cold. Damn brat can't even let me sacrifice myself without screwing it up. Anko thought with a scowl. If this continued, Kisame would eventually get tired of playing around and simply cut her in half with his massive Zanbeitu that was still sitting off to the side where he had left it. Finally, Kisame caught the woman by her neck and lifted her clear off the ground. Ah, you always have to catch snakes below the head so they don't bite you. Fuck you. Anko spat as she kicked at Kisame's stomach. The Sharkman had already fallen for that once, however, and he wasn't about to get caught by the same trick. That was Hidan's gig. Itachi grew tired of the show and walked over to Naruto. Kisame, end this. We have things to do. Too bad, and here I wanted to play some more. Oh well, time is wasting. Anko gritted her teeth as Kisame increased the pressure on her windpipe. There wasn't much she could do. The missing nin had suddenly revealed the bulk of his power. There was always that jutsu, but using it would mean. Kisame, stop. The words were left hanging in the air for a few moments before the Kiri-nin complied. What's going on, Itachi-san? He asked, honestly confused. Itachi was still hovering over Naruto, but his eyes were downright murderous. If looks could kill, or, in Itachi's case, allowed to kill, then Naruto would have been a smoldering crater of black flames. Idly, Kisame noticed that it almost looked like Itachi was talking to Leader Sama when he telepathically called the members, but he couldn't hear anything. Drop the girl, Kisame. We're leaving. With that, Itachi hurriedly walked away from Naruto with a deep scowl on his face. He wasn't even waiting on his partner as he jumped into the forest. Like a lost puppy, Kisame looked between Anko and where Itachi had disappeared to. But, what about the Kyuubi? He cried out in vain. What the hell is going on? Anko grunted as she found herself unceremoniously dropped on her butt by reluctant Kisame. Don't think this is over. Kisame stated as he ran over to Samahata. We'll be back for the Kyuubi, mark my words. The Junin let out a ragged breath as the missing nin followed his partner into the forest. Although she had absolutely no idea what had just happened, Anko wasn't about to start questioning it. She winced as the cursed seal on her neck painfully snaked back into the Hokage's seal. Just a few more moments and she would have broken it herself to save the brat. You caused me a lot of problems, Geki, Anko said as she stumbled over to the unconscious boy. You take a nap now of all times. I suppose you want me to carry your ass all the way back to Konoha. Naruto didn't make any move to answer as Anko hoisted the boy up onto her shoulder. She ran her free hand through his disheveled hair and sighed, although there was a small smile on her lips as she did so. I was wrong, Naruto, Anko whispered. If what happened today didn't break you, then absolutely nothing will. You've really grown up, haven't you? Maybe this trip did some good after all. Finally, the weary warrior turned her eyes back towards Konoha. Somewhere, deep down, she felt that a weight had been lifted from both hers and Naruto's shoulders, even if he was still a brat. Slash dash 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 slash. Are you sure all this paperwork is necessary? Asuma asked, still in disguise. The mountain of work on his father's desk was taller than he was. The clerk, a snotty chunin that was too wound up on coffee, adjusted his glasses and frowned. Of course it is, Hokage-sama, he declared. Asuma's eye began to tick as he heard Kurenai stifle a laugh from the door where she was playing guard. She could easily come in here and help, but the Junin knew she wouldn't just to see him suffer. Where the hell is the Hokage? He should have been here hours ago. The poor man lamented as he started on the massive pile of evil paperwork. Several blocks away, in a small bar, Kakashi was happily sipping on his favorite brand of mini bottles. See, the genius of these things is that they make you feel like a giant when you drink them. His drinking companion, none other than Asuma, was having fun putting his entire hand around the tiny bottle. By the gods, you're right. I feel like I'm 20 feet tall. This is amazing. The man was more than a little drunk. Suddenly, a random thought caught Kakashi. Hey, don't you have, like, Hokage stuff to do? He asked, clearly drunk himself. However, the undercover leader of Konoha shrugged and downed his drink in one gulp. My son always wanted more responsibility, so I think I can be nice to him and let him have a few more hours to play Hokage. Aren't I a great father? Kakashi had to agree with the man as he ordered another tray of mini beers. Asuma was a lucky guy indeed. Ah, are you sure you're okay, Sakura? Kakashi asked with his usual lazy drawl. There was a real bit of concern in his voice, however. Across from him on the wide open space of Team 7's training ground, Sakura struggled to stay on her feet. Her chest was heaving dangerously as if she had just ran a marathon race around Konoha. Beside her, stuck in the ground and being used as something to lean on, was the Kubikiri Haucho. The pink-haired girl, despite her condition, looked up at the Junin with a razor gaze. Why yes, I've got to keep going, Sakura stated as she tried to lift the large Zanbedu from the ground. She managed to get it out of the ground, but no higher than a few inches. Come on, Kakashi-sensei. Despite his concern, Kakashi shrugged and made a seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a pop, a replica of Kakashi poofed into existence before the pair. The Bunshin had the same lazy look as its creator, however. The real Junin pulled out his Ika Ika book and leaned against a tree. Ready, Sakura? He asked, not even bothering to look up from his book. Begin. On Kakashi's words, the Kage Bunshin hanged into a copy of a familiar face. Now standing there in place of the Konoha nin was a tall, lanky man with bandages on his face and a large sword on his back. Momochi Zabuza walked among the living once more, at least appearance-wise. Seeing the condescending face of the dead missing nin filled Sakura with the drive to make another attempt at success. With as much energy as she could muster, the small girl tried to rush the Bunshin. Being held back by the massive sword, and not having enough adrenaline to force her body to work overtime severely slowed this charge, and the clone had no problem parrying the clumsy strike with only its hands. Sakura fell to the ground with the Kubikiri Haucho still clutched in her hands. There was no way she could lift the sword, though, and it just laid to her side. Damn it. Sakura cursed through her gasps for breath. She had been training like this for over a week with little improvement. No matter how hard she tried, Sakura couldn't carry the great sword like Zabuza. Killing Gedu was a fluke. She mumbled. Kakashi flipped to another page of his book before dispelling his Zabuza clone. You can't expect this to happen all at once, he stated. Zabuza was one of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Shichinin Shu, so of course he was excellent with that sword. Sakura gripped the handle of the Zanbedu just a little bit harder. I have to do this, if I don't, she let the thought trail off. Getting up to even a casual level of knowledge in fighting with a sword like the Kubikiri Haucho would be good enough for her to challenge Ino at the Chunin exam and win. Can we go over the basic forms again? Sakura asked once she had gotten her wind back. Kakashi sighed but made no motion to break up the training session. Instead, he once again summoned a Kage Bunshin to henge into Zabuza, but this time, instead of waiting for an attack, the fake Zabuza drew its own Zanbedu from its resting place on his back. Sakura took a deep breath before getting back to her feet. Heaving the massive sword into a reed stance, the genin watched what her teacher would do. The clone ran through some basic swings and Sakura pushed her body to copy them. Each time, the clone would perform the action flawlessly while Sakura's arms would shake from the exertion and mostly flounder as soon as the strike motion was complete. It seemed that Sakura was simply getting through the drills on her grit and determination alone. Off on the sidelines, Kakashi watched with curiosity as his least impressive student made impressive strides in the art she was set to master. Good thing I didn't dump what I learned from watching Zabuza, he silently mused. Contrary to popular belief, the Sharingan wasn't a beat-all tool. The user still had to have good enough memory to remember everything that they copied. Usually, when he had absorbed so much, Kakashi would simply force himself to forget. It was a very good thing Sakura had asked for his help with training before he did so in regards to Zabuza's fighting style. Arg! Sakura grunted in frustration as her sword slipped from her hands after a particularly strenuous move. The young girl rubbed her wrist but made no motion to reclaim her weapon. Taking that as a sign that she was ready to take a break, Kakashi walked over to her and nonchalantly sat down on the grass beside his student. Sakura glared at the sword, her hands clenching into fists. Why can't I get this? She asked in frustration. You're doing well, Kakashi stated. But you can't expect to suddenly become a master at something simply because you put your mind to it, Sakura. Still, I think you'll make a good showing during the exams. It wasn't a lie on the Junin's part. Sakura already had enough basic forms learned that she wouldn't look foolish during the exams. There was no denying, however, that she was a girl and as such lacked a natural gift with physical endurance. Moreover, the art she was trying to learn was something not even Sasuke or Neji could cope with at the moment. The young preteen sighed. What was the point of practicing day in day out if she would never see results? I have to get better no matter what. If I don't, I'll always be just background noise to everyone else, Sakura told herself with a shake of her head. Kakashi, who had misinterpreted the cause of Sakura's sigh and head shake as frustrated exhaustion, closed his book and dispelled the cage bunchen. Okay, training's over for today, Sakura. The young girl looked ready to protest before Kakashi fixed her with a glare from his visible eye. Working yourself to death won't suddenly make you into a little Zabuza, he said, surprising Sakura enough that she didn't argue. It's going to take you years regardless of how hard you train. Go home and relax, you did good today. With that, the Junin shunshined away from the clearing, leaving Sakura to simmer with annoyance. Still grumbling to herself about lazy, porn reading, teachers, Sakura pulled out a scroll she had in her pouch and unrolled it on the ground beside her. Heaving the massive Kubikiri Haucho onto the paper, Sakura ran through a few hand seals before slamming her palm onto the blade. A plum of smoke exploded from the paper and in an instant, the Zanbedu was sealed inside of the scroll. While it didn't look anywhere near as intimidating to pull out a scroll in a fight, it saved Sakura a great deal of energy that she would spend carting the massive weapon around. It also allowed her to stay inconspicuous on the streets of Konoha. There, much better, Sakura stated as she rolled the scroll back up. For a moment, she inspected her clothes and frowned slightly. Her usual red dress and shorts weren't really suited to her new fighting style and she couldn't carry around the Kubikiri Haucho on her back even if she wanted to. Since Kakashi called off training today, I might as well shop for some new clothes, she thought aloud as she headed towards the village. Shopping to Sakura was one of her few guilty pleasures. Even though the pink-haired girl had never had many friends to shop with, it was still fun. Seeing as her last mission to Wave had been upgraded to A rank, Sakura found she had quite a bit of extra money for this trip. After a quick trip home for a shower and change of clothes, Sakura was off to downtown Konoha. Thankfully her mother wasn't home to give her another lecture on spending her money wisely, those were always a bore. Okay, I need to make a list of things I need to get, Sakura mentally told herself. She needed something light and free so her arms don't get held back by fabric when she swings her sword. Zabuza had simply ran around without a top, but Sakura instantly ruled out that option. A display of fishnet tops in a store window caught her attention. Konoha wasn't very cold, so that wouldn't be a problem. A simple sports bra or chest wrap underneath would be all that was needed. Besides, that crazy Junin that sometimes bothered her sensei wore fishnets, so it wasn't a rare thing. The fact that there was a sale going on at that store sealed the deal. Sakura walked inside the shop and tried to find an attendant. However, being the walking sharks that they are, the attendant found the girl first. Can I help you find something? A blonde woman in her 20s asked as she walked up to Sakura. I'd like to buy a few of those fishnet shirts you have in the window, Sakura explained. For a moment, the attendant simply looked the younger girl over with an appraising eye before something in particular caught her attention. You're a ninja? She asked, motioning to the forehead protector Sakura wore as a ribbon. Blushing a bit from embarrassment, Sakura nodded. A genin. Right this way, then. The clerk chirped as she led her customer to the back of the store. This is where we keep our shinobi wardrobe. Curious, Sakura followed. The back of the store was more lackluster and bleak with most of the same items she had seen before. The blonde clerk was standing next to a rack of fishnet tops that didn't look any different from those up front. As she took a few tops to try out from the rack, Sakura had to ask, what's different about the clothes back here? It all looks the same to me. The items at the front are made for a civilian life, these are made for a shinobi one. Stronger, longer lasting, and even some extra pockets. Sakura nodded in understanding as she felt the fabric of the top she was holding. It did seem fairly sturdy for something made out of fishnet mesh. Can I try these on? She asked. The attendant nodded and pointed to a lone stall at the back of the room. Sakura thanked her and started to walk back when another item sparked her attention. Sitting on one of the shelves were the same type of camouflage pants Zabuza had been wearing. A blue color was a rare thing to see in Konoha. Do you have these in my size? Sakura asked as she held up the pants in question. The attendant blinked a few times before looking at another shelf of pants. I think, yes, here they are, she said in triumph. You do know that these are boys' clothes, right? She asked with a confused look. Sakura shrugged. Pants hold up longer and protect my legs, Sakura said with a serious look. The woman only shook her head as she handed over the clothing. Inside the dressing room, the pink-haired girl tried on her new outfit. The pants, while a bit baggy, fit her well, and the sports bra she had on underneath her dress worked well with the fishnet top. When she saw herself in the mirror, Sakura had to giggle. "Oh Kami, I look like a prostitute." She laughed. Sakura raised her arms and tested them for motion. She could easily pivot her arms around to her back without any resistance from her clothing. Not bad. After her purchase was made, Sakura stepped out onto the street in her new clothes. A few people gave her looks, but upon seeing her forehead protector, they backed off. Sakura noticed the looks and wondered what they were. She had never gotten any notice before. With a start, she realized what people were looking at. My forehead protector, she wondered. No one ever noticed it before. Now, it was with a new sense of pride that Sakura found herself with as she walked down the streets of Konoha. While a few people were giving her looks based on her new wardrobe, many more giving her a respectful distance. So caught up with her newfound social status was she, that Sakura didn't even notice what shop she was about to walk into before it was too late. Yamanaka Ino was not a happy kunoichi. It was only a petty 2 days before the Chunin exams and she was without a training partner. Her team. She scoffed at the idea. Shikamaru was too lazy to do anything and Choji couldn't help her any at all. As it was, she couldn't even leave her family's flower shop unless she had something ninja related to do. No mission or team business meant no get out of work free card. Stupid Naruto, Ino grumbled. She didn't understand what was going on with him at all. Ever since he had come back slumped over Anko's shoulder, things had changed. He no longer trained alone, he was either with Kakashi or Anko all the time. It was, frankly, getting annoying to hear Naruto always laugh and joke with Anko. The blonde idly tapped her fingers on the shop's countertop as her mind mulled over the strange special Junin. Things had definitely changed. The two were often seen walking around Konoha together, either marauding dango, ramen stands, or being a general pestilence to their friends. In fact, there were all kinds of rumors going around. Ino was pulled out of her thoughts by the door to the shop opening with a jingle of bells. At least a customer would get her mind off things, the young girl thought as she looked up with a smile. The smile faded when she saw the person standing there, or, in this case, the lack thereof. "Hello," Ino called out as she stepped from behind the counter. When no one immediately answered, the young genin started looking around the shelves and aisles for whatever or whoever had tripped the bell. Behind one of the large coolers used for keeping flowers fresh, Sakura repeatedly cursed herself. Of all the shops to casually wander into, this was the absolute worst. How could she not notice it was the Yamanaka flower shop? Sure, she wanted to get back into Ino's life, but she hadn't counted on doing so this quickly. When Ino's footsteps grew closer, the pink-haired girl reacted on instinct. A sudden popping sound suddenly caught Ino's attention. Now on alert, the blonde rushed over to one of the refrigerator units and pulled a kunai. "I don't know who you are, but come out right now," she ordered. When nothing happened, Ino took a look behind the unit only to find an empty space. Shaking her head, Ino put away her weapon. Having problems. The girl reacted on instinct and her fist went into motion in a sweeping arc as she spun around. A hand shot out and caught Ino's fist before it could make contact. The strong grip made the genin pull her kunai with her free hand and she stabbed at her opponent. Amazingly, this attack was caught as well in another strong hand. "Whoa, calm down. Why you little?" Ino stopped her abuse when she looked up into the face of her assailant. There, looking down at her with a cocky smile, was a handsome boy that looked no older than she. He had long, black hair, sharp teeth, and piercing green eyes. What really stood out, however, was the form-fitting fishnet shirt that left his chest bare and the Kurigakure forehead protector draping lazily over the side of his head. "Who are you? What are you doing in here?" she barked, ripping her hands from the stranger with no resistance. "I'm just here to look for some flowers," the Kiri-nin responded with a chuckle. As to make a point, the shinobi sauntered around the shop looking at various displays. "What can you recommend?" Still dubious of her customer's motives, Ino walked over to a bin of old flowers. "These old, withered ones would suit you," the young girl huffed. To Ino's surprise, the Kiri-nin laughed. "Not a very good sales pitch, you must not get a lot of business." "Yeah, well, most of my customers don't sneak around my shop," Ino shot back. The Kiri-nin merely shrugged. "I wanted to see how good the competition would be before the exam, you can't blame me," the young man responded. "It took you long enough to find me and I managed to disarm you, I hope that's not all you've got." "Ha, I wasn't even being serious," the blonde answered with a smirk of her own. "So you're here for the exam. Where's the rest of your team?" The ninja looked panicked for a moment, but quickly covered it up. "Oh, they're probably lurking around somewhere. They're a secretive bunch." Ino nodded her head in understanding. Most Kiri-nin were that way from what limited experience she had with them. "Yeah, Well, just don't go causing any trouble around the village. Anbu isn't as nice as I am, she warned. Can you tell me your name or is that secret Kurigakure information? Ino asked with an amused smile. Tilting his head in thought, the shinobi pondered the question for a bit before answering. My name is Haku. Well, good to meet you, Haku, Ino said in a friendly voice. I'm Yamanaka Ino, welcome to Konoha. The young genin thought for a moment and smirked. You know, I could shoot you around the village a bit if you want, Ino offered. The Kiri nin's eyes widened. That won't really be. It's no problem, Ino said, cutting him off. I was looking for an excuse to get out of working anyway, come on. Oh Kami, what have I gotten into? The hanged Sakura wondered as her former best friend and rival dragged her out the door. Slash dash 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 slash. Hey brat, you're pushing it a bit much for a former invalid, Enko scoffed as Naruto continued to spar with his snake-like clone. Naruto dodged a jab from Orochi and tried to pull a feint by twitching his leg. It didn't work as the transformed snake was much too clever for something like that, and Naruto was rewarded by a welt forming from a counter backhand. Obviously being in that hospital for a few days has made you lethargic, Orochi stated. He knew Naruto was never very good with taijutsu, but this was beyond sad. Can't you even hit me without those eyes of yours? The blonde mumbled something about a handicap as he blocked a few shots from Orochi. Enko had ordered him not to use the Sharingan because, she reasoned, that it made him dependent on it. If that weren't enough, the woman had also made it a no weapons, no jutsu fight. Pure, grueling, taijutsu. Hubby-chan, if you think you can beat him without anything, I'd like to see it, the boy grumbled. Enko, who was lazily sprawled out in the grass, merely waved him off. I don't have to prove anything. I'm already a Junin, you're a genin. See the difference? She asked, snickering at her student's plight. Don't you mean special Junin? Naruto asked. He grinned when Enko flinched. What does a special Junin do again, Enko-chan? I forgot. When said special Junin didn't answer, Orochi felt the need to pick up the slack. It's an honorary title given to Chunin that specialize in a single area. Despite the age difference, she's technically only one rank above you. Naruto chuckled when Enko actually sat up to glare at an unrepentant Orochi. Not for long, Orochi. The Chunin exams are starting in a few days and Guy-sensei said he's going to enter us. If I really do well, I could be promoted above hubby-chan over there. Alright, that's it, Enko bellowed as she jumped up. I'll show you what this special Junin can do. Come here. And thus was the sight that greeted Guy's team as they walked into the training area. Naruto being strangled by a furious Enko with Orochi laughing to himself off to the side. Yosh, such vigorous training, Guy shouted. Tenten sighed and shook her head. Guy-sensei, it looks more like Enko is trying to kill him. I think you should break it up before Naruto gets brain damage or something. Lee, however, seemed to take offense to this and rushed out in front of his two teammates, blocking their path. No, pain is the path to progress. This is obviously a special bonding exercise between Naruto-kun and Enko-san. It must not be interrupted. He's starting to gag. Tenten mumbled. Lee, your youthful wisdom has prevented me from making a grave error. Guy said, his mind blocking out his other student's observation. Now he's turning blue. Lee started to tear up as Naruto's gagging noises provided a backdrop to the dramatic scene. Guy-sensei. Lee. Tenten walked past her sobbing team with a sigh. Those two were such children sometimes. Enko-san, please don't kill Naruto yet. We need him for the exam. Try. Tor. Naruto gasped out as he clawed at Enko's vice-like grip with little effect. The special Junin blinked a few times before releasing the genin in her clutches. Oh, you're right. They do use the team thing these days, don't they? Naruto coughed and hacked as he greedily breathed in that beloved air. Why you know that they do, crazy woman. You're one of the examiners. Enko modestly laughed. It's not as important as it sounds. I just have to set some things up and thin out the herd. Thin out the herd? You make us sound like cattle. Naruto mumbled as he rubbed his neck. Enko didn't answer and it was obvious by the gleam in her eyes that she was going to enjoy torturing the poor genins unfortunate enough to pass the first round. By this time, Guy and Lee had finished their moment and the leader of Team 2 gave Naruto a thumbs up. You are looking well, Naruto-kun. Your youthful stamina serves you well. Tenten was far more sensible in her appraisal as she helped Naruto to his feet. As dramatic as that was, Guy-sensei has a point. Should you really be training only a day getting out of the hospital? I mean, you were kidnapped for Kami-sama's sake. Naruto scratched the back of his head out in embarrassment as Tenten checked his neck. Hubby-chan has me taking it slow. She won't teach me any jutsu or anything. He whined. I want to know how you did that cool come up from the ground jutsu you used on Kisame. That isn't something a genin needs to know. Anko snapped, but her voice was jovial. I'll teach it to you after the exams or something. Guy could only smile at the way the two were getting along now. He was worried that Naruto would feel neglected from losing so much training with the rest of the team due to his hospital stay, but it seems those fears were unfounded. It's good that you're recouping so well, Naruto, Guy said in a surprisingly subdued voice with Lee nodding in agreement. Naruto smiled back at his teacher. It was times like this when he was really happy to have Guy as an instructor. When the man wasn't putting on such a show, he was all right. Okay, you guys are breaking our training here, Anko bluntly stated. Partly because of that, and partly because she didn't like the way that Tenten girl was fawning over her student. As if the green beast inside of him was awoken at the mere thought of training, Guy pumped his fist in the air. Yush. That is why we're here. I was going to try and teach my wonderful students a special technique. One so dangerous, I myself only learned it when I became a Chunin. Tenten and Naruto gave each other a slightly frightened look. It was going to be one of those interesting days, they could tell. Guy, Anko cut in, tapping her foot in annoyance. I am not going to let you teach Naruto the lotus. Said Junin's excitement deflated at the declaration. But, it's only one little technique. He tried to reason. No, I couldn't even learn the thing and I had a Sannin teaching me. Anko declared, ignoring the surprised looks coming from the genin. Besides, we both know the only person here that can actually learn it in your team is Lee. Stop trying to be so nice. Guy's head drooped as Anko hit the nail on the head. Naruto didn't want to leave it at that, though. Why can't I learn it, hubby-chan? The boy demanded. He winced as Tenten elbowed him in the ribs. And Tenten, why can't we both learn it? With a snort, Anko pointed to a large dead tree sitting off to the side of the field. Can either of you kick that thing up into the air? When the both shook their head, she shrugged. Then you can't learn the lotus. Come on, let's go get lunch while these two kill themselves. Tenten and Naruto watched Anko walk away, then they looked back to the massive tree she had pointed out. Well, good luck with that, Lee. Naruto shouted as he ran to catch up with Anko. Yeah, we know you can do it. Tenten said as she too ran off to do some solo training. Neither of them wanted to get caught by Guy and roped into attempting the insane feat of strength. Slash dash 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 slash. How did I let Ino talk me into this? To Sakura's dismay, the pair of former rivals were now sitting in a local bistro over lunch. After a lengthy tour of the city, Ino had insisted upon treating her new friend to a meal. Now, they were sitting around chatting. Hey, you alright, Haku? Ino asked. You spaced out for a while there. I think I'm more interesting than that, the young girl said with a laugh. Sakura tried her best to smirk, but she was certain the unease showed in her demeanor. Ah, I'm just nervous with all these people around, Haku responded. Trying her best to act nonchalant, Sakura leaned back in her booth and spread out her legs like a guy would do. Not used to peace like this in Kurigakure. Yeah, I heard some things about that, Ino said as she popped a piece of barbecue into her mouth. The bloody mist, or something, right? The young man nodded. That matched up with what Zabuza had said about his experiences in Kiri. It changed a few years ago, though, Sakura added. The pair continued eating with an odd silence hanging over the table. Ino could tell that her new friend was nervous about something despite how laid back he seemed. She figured that since a few of the Chunin and Junin had been looking at him strangely that Haku was getting uncomfortable. Guess I'll have to relax him a bit, Ino thought with a smirk. Suddenly feeling a bit adventurous, Ino hopped up from her seat and moved over to the side of the booth Sakura was sitting at. Sakura nearly choked on her food when Ino suddenly sat next to her. What are you doing? She asked. I'm just getting comfortable, Ino said in an innocent tone. When the blonde started to actually move in closer, Sakura had sat through enough. I think I should. Ino, is that you? Before Sakura could finish her statement, she was interrupted by the arrival of the absolute last person she wanted to see. Naruto quickly took the empty side of the booth while with Anko crowding in after him. The older Junin raised an eyebrow at Sakura and smirked. The disguised genin got the impression that she was as transparent as glass to the woman. Naruto, Ino said in surprise, ignoring Anko. What have you been up to? The young Uchiha shrugged and pilfered one of the barbecue pieces from the grill. Training for the exams, what else? He laughed. When Anko stole said pilfered meat from him, he frowned and took notice of the disguised Sakura. Who's your friend? This, Ino began, is Haku. He's from Kurigakure for the exams. Anko swallowed the barbecue piece and looked Haku over. Kurigakure, huh, what island? There was a hint of amusement in the woman's voice. Slightly panicked, Sakura fished around her brain for a response. Obviously Naruto's crazy teacher was trying to catch her in a lie, so she had to come up with something believable. If it were any other genin, Sakura was certain they would have come up blank. The southern island, Shima. My parents moved to the main island when I started the academy. For a moment, Anko looked surprised at the answer. Maybe she was reconsidering what she thought she knew. Regardless, the purple-haired woman still seemed dubious of the Kiri Nin's validity, but she kept it to herself. After all, it would be more fun to simply let things play out. Seeking to break the odd atmosphere, Ino spoke up. Oh, Naruto, did you hear about Sasuke-kun? She asked. When the boy shook his head, she continued. He was on a mission to Wave and the entire team was attacked by a missing nin. Really? What happened? Naruto asked with Sakura taking an obvious interest. Even Anko, who liked to think that she was past such things as genin gossip, discreetly listened in while trying to look bored. Well, I heard Asuma-sensei talking about it earlier and he said that Momochi Zabuza was hired by some guy in Wave to kill the guy Sasuke-kun's team was supposed to guard. At this point, Sakura couldn't hold in her excitement and jumped into the conversation. Momochi Zabuza, she asked. He was an A- class missing nin from my village, Sakura lied. Do you know who killed him? The question caused Ino to scoff. That's the crazy thing, she said. Asuma-sensei said Sakura killed him if you can believe it. Sakura, Naruto repeated before anyone else could comment on it. That girl who used to follow you around. He laughed. By this time, Sakura was holding onto the side of the table hard enough to crack some of the wood. What's so funny? She hissed. Zabuza was one of the strongest Junin from Kiri. Naruto waved the hostility off, however. Yeah, but Haruno Sakura isn't the kind of ninja that could take out someone like that even if she got lucky. That was the last straw for Sakura. Hey, Naruto, she isn't that bad, Ino shouted over the hanged kunoichi. I mean, sure she's annoying and weak, but she's not totally useless, the blonde quasi defended. At least she's like a walking encyclopedia behind that forehead, that's always helpful. Naruto shrugged. He was about to say more on the subject but Anko let out a long, obvious, yawn. Okay, kiddies. As entertaining as this is, I'm going to drag this idiot off to have lunch. We still have more training to do. The blonde genin nodded and slipped out of the booth after Anko. I've got to weasel out some jutsu from hubby-chan later so I'll leave you two to your date, Naruto laughed, ignoring the scoff Anko gave him in response. As the pair left, Sakura was still trying to wrap her mind around what Naruto had said. A date? What the hell was that? She mentally screamed at herself. When she looked over to her side, she found, to her abject horror, that Ino was looking right at her with a slight blush. Kami-sama, she's. Ino, I've got to go. Sakura stuttered as she tried to climb out of the booth. She was getting a great deal of strange looks from the various people in the restaurant but she didn't care. Ignoring the looks, Sakura flipped over the booth and made for the exit. I can't believe this. Sakura mentally screamed as she ran out the door. She could hear Ino calling after her but she didn't stop. One quick leap up onto a shop's overhanging ledge and another to the rooftops and Sakura was rushing along the tops of Konoha's buildings to escape the unsavory truth. Her former best friend and rival was attracted to her hanged self. It's not you, Sakura, it's not. It's Haku, she told herself. No matter how many times she told herself that, however, Sakura couldn't shake the way Ino had looked at her. Oh, Sakura. The words instantly caused the girl to freeze. In front of her, leaning against a chimney, was Hatake Kakashi looking as lazy as ever. The Junin was reading his favorite book but he did pause long enough to look up at his disguised student. You might want to drop the henge before Anbu arrests you for causing a disturbance. Sakura looked behind herself, half expecting Ino or a masked Anbu to be standing there. To her considerable relief, the rooftop was empty except for the Junin and herself so she relaxed the chakra flowing around her form and shifted back to a small, pink-haired, kunoichi. Nice clothes, Kakashi stated once the henge was down. Going for the Anko look. Fishnet works better than fabric, sensei. Sakura defended. And you're too old to be looking that closely anyway. Kakashi coughed several times and had the decency to look back down at his book rather than his angry student. So, what's with the act? He asked, changing the subject. Now it was time for Sakura be sheepish. It was all a mistake, Sakura stated. I was, spying on Ino before the exam. You know, look at the competition. It was glaringly obvious that he didn't buy that excuse. How about what shook you up so much that you alerted almost every Anbu in Konoha? Not to mention you caused a scene at a local Junin hangout. Sakura didn't immediately answer. Well, Ino kinda took a liking to my hanged self, she admitted, blushing red as a tomato. Kakashi only blinked for a few seconds. Wait, Yamanaka Ino has the hots for you? He asked with a barely suppressed giggle. The kunoichi didn't know what was more disturbing, Ino having a crush on her alter ego or her teacher using slang. Kakashi-sensei, she only liked the henge. Don't make this into something you'd read out of your perverted books. Ah. Kakashi scratched the back of his neck. If that's all you say it is, just don't cause problems before the exam. Everyone is on edge right now because of the foreign ninja in the city. Sakura nodded in understanding. Sorry, it was just a spur of the moment thing. It won't happen again. Satisfied that Sakura seemed to be somewhat apologetic, Kakashi nodded and closed his book. Well, just be more careful next time. If you want to gather some information like that again, try not to act so suspicious. A genin level henge is nothing a chunin or junin can't get around, so they know it'll be you. Sakura nodded again, but Kakashi wasn't paying attention. Something behind Sakura had caught his attention. Slowly, the pink-haired genin turned around and found, once again, that the one person she had wanted to avoid had caught up. Sakura. Kakashi. Ino asked, confused. What are you two doing up here? Where's Haku? It was at this point that Kakashi closed his book. Well, I think you get the gist of what I'm talking about, Sakura, he stated. Then, with what Sakura instantly recognized was a slight chuckle in his voice, he added, as they say, three's a crowd. Have fun you two. With that, the Junin shunshined away in a swirl of leaves, leaving a confused Ino and irate Sakura alone on the roof. Ino just stared at her former friend in confusion before shaking her head. That guy is weird, she decided. Anyway, Sakura, did you see a tall, good-looking guy come through here? He was wearing fishnet. Kinda like yours, actually. Yeah, Sakura blurted out. I was up here training with Kakashi-sensei and he ran through here. He said something about being late for a team meeting. The youngest Yamanaka grunted in frustration. Guys are all such pigs. He could have said he had a meeting before going nuts like that and leaving, she sighed. Why are all the cute guys crazy? Sakura nearly gagged at the last line. See cute. She gulped. What about Sasuke-kun? Oh, I'm still going to get Sasuke in the end, Ino replied, smirking at the other girl. Even though she had given up as seeing Sakura as a rival, it was still fun to get under her old friend's skin from time to time. I just want to have some fun before I settle down. Just fun? Sakura asked as if the phrase was alien to her. That's really all it is to you? Ino raised an eye at the girl. What's it to you? She asked once she realized Sakura was getting somewhat angry. Even Sakura didn't know why she was getting upset. Ino's words had just set her off for some reason. You're just going to use Haku for your own fun and then toss him off for some other guy later. Sakura ranted. I don't believe you. Ino was taken aback. We're young, Sakura, go live a little. Sakura's fists were balled tight and her lip trembling in rage. You. The young girl couldn't get her thoughts together. When Ino only stood there looking confused and annoyed, it was the last straw. You pig. The blonde girl's confused annoyance turned into shock as Sakura near instantly closed the distance between them. Ino had to dodge quick as a fist sailed through the air her face had previously occupied. However, she couldn't move fast enough to block the follow-up knee strike which caught her under the chin. Ino's entire jaw shook with the impact and she was sent flying back several feet before she skidded to a stop. When Ino wrenched her neck back down to glare at Sakura, she was met with the same burning look in Sakura's eyes. What the hell was that, Sakura? Ino demanded. Her fury intensified as she felt a trickle of blood fall from her lip. Are you nuts? Sakura glared back. Shut up, Ino, she yelled back. I'm sick of your attitude. My attitude isn't your business, Sakura. Ino shot back. She dropped into a fighting stance in anticipation of something happening. You know you can't beat me in anything, that includes war and love. Just give up. The pink-haired Kunoichi also got into a ready stance. Oh yeah, Ino Buddha. I think it is when you try to throw yourself at one of my friends. It was a lie, but it was better than trying to pin down the real reason for her fury. Throw myself at him. Are you nuts? He was all over me. Ino shouted back. Sakura gasped in disbelief. That's a lie, pig. You were flirting with him all day and you know it. Ino's eyes narrowed. There was just something about Sakura that could always get her blood boiling in no time at all. So what if I was? Like I said before, it's none of your business. And I'm saying it is, Ino Buddha. Sakura answered back. The two glared at each other, alone on the rooftop. Sakura was near tears with frustration and Ino was bathed in righteous indignation. On an unheard signal, the two started the match which had been brewing for over a year. From the outset, Ino showed how much more raw combat experience she had amassed from being one of the most touted kunoichi in her class. Sakura, despite the lucky hit she had gotten in pre-battle, was constantly on the defensive. Her academy-taught taijutsu was no match for the professional efficiency Ino was showing. A solid punch easily lifted Sakura off her feet. Sensing the opportunity, Ino leapt into the air and scissor-kicked Sakura in the stomach, planting her into the ground on her back. Satisfied, Sakura, I don't want to hurt you that much but you need to stop butting into my life, Ino ordered as she skidded to a stop a few feet away. Seeing that Sakura was still going to get back up, the blonde took a deep breath and finally gave voice to a frustration over a year in the making. You always do this, Sakura. You've been like this ever since the academy. Always following me around, always trying to get back into my life. I'm sick of it. Sakura pushed herself off the ground with a grunt. This was the last thing she wanted to hear at the moment. Shut up, Ino, she warned. The young Yamanaka, however, shook her head. No, you're going to listen to me. First was Sasuke, then it was our rivalry, now it's this. When are you going to stop, Sakura? She demanded. How can you say that? Sakura said in a low voice as she got back to her feet. Ino didn't notice it, but the kunoichi was fingering a very distinctive scroll in her weapon's pouch. How can you say that when it was you who first butted into my life? Ino was surprised by the sudden fire in her opponent's eyes. That was different, she argued. It was. It was not different. Sakura shouted over the other girl. You took me in and then forgot about me. You betrayed me. How could you, Ino? Sakura asked as her voice rose a few pitches. Ino's eyes narrowed and set her jaw. You betrayed me first, she said, stopping Sakura cold. I did take you in, Sakura. You were my best friend, and what did you do? You betrayed me. You can't say this to me when you were the one who ended it, Sakura. It was then that Sakura's eyes lost all fire and defiance. What if I don't want that anymore, Ino? Sakura asked as her arms dropped limply to her sides. Reality had thrown a bucket of cold water on her resolve. Are you willing to give up Sasuke-kun? Ino asked. If you aren't, then we haven't settled anything, have we? She asked in a stone-cold tone. When Sakura weighed having Sasuke to herself and having her best friend back, when she seriously considered it, the answer shocked the girl. However, Sakura was not ready to give those stray, traitorous, thoughts voice or attention. Not yet. Then I guess, we'll have to do this like we always do, Sakura stated in a dead tone. Because Sasuke-kun is, and always was, mine. Ino's expression turned hard at Sakura's answer. Sakura, I told you once that you can't and won't beat me. You never will. You're not even worth my time anymore. Sakura and Ino stared at each other for a few moments, betrayal and frustration mirrored on both of their faces. Sakura, however, seemed more put out than Ino. Still not up to your standards, huh? Sakura snarled, finding some of the resolve she had discovered inside herself during the mission to Wave. What's it going to take, Ino? What's it going to take for you to take me seriously again? As an answer to the question, Ino relaxed her stance and smirked. Then, the other shoe dropped. Sakura, I never took you seriously. In that single instant, everything stopped for Sakura. Her eyes widened, her muscles went lax, her mind went blank. Every single moment of happiness from her childhood with the girl standing before her shattered like glass dashed upon the ground. When time finally caught back up to her, Sakura had already pulled the scroll from her pouch. Ino watched with disbelief as the scroll erupted in a cloud of smoke. A summoning jutsu, Ino hissed. Her eyes widened by several degrees as the smoke cleared. Sakura. What? Is this enough for you, Ino? Sakura shrieked with rage as she heaved the Kubikiri Haucho onto her shoulder. Oddly, its weight felt comforting to the pink-haired girl. Like a shield to hide her swirling emotions behind. Ino narrowed her eyes. Am I supposed to be impressed? So you have a ridiculously sized sword, big deal. Sakura didn't give her the chance to say anything more. Sakura, in an impressive burst of speed, closed the distance. A wide slice cut the chimney Kakashi had been leaning on cleanly in half. Ino barely had time to leap into the air as Sakura's reverse swing sailed under her feet. In an amazing feat of acrobatics, Ino twisted her body and delivered a missile kick that caught Sakura in the shoulder. With the weight of the Zanbeitu, the kick sent her off balance and Ino was eager to press her attack. You're mine, Ino yelled as she bared down on Sakura. The other genin wasn't so easily dealt with, however. In her own moment of insight, Sakura slammed the tip of her sword down into the roof and used it as a springboard to launch her own kick from. Zabuza's pilfered maneuver had the desired effect and the kick sent Ino sprawling. However, that momentum was lost when Sakura took time to lift her sword back onto her shoulder. Ino rallied and caught Sakura with a desperate shoulder tackle. Both girls rolled around struggling with each other for advantage. By a stroke of luck, Sakura managed to catch Ino's hands and pin her to the roof. Give up, Ino, Sakura stated as she used her weight to keep Ino pinned. The blonde looked up at her former friend with defiance. Her eyes were no longer dead and listless, they were wild and raging. To her surprise, she found the look mirrored in Sakura's own. It's not over yet, Sakura, Ino shouted back. To Sakura's surprise, Ino closed her eyes and concentrated. Heppo. Genzenbuki. Sakura shrieked as Ino's hair sprang to life and wrapped around her neck. Sakura tried to fight back, but the force of the jutsu was too much and she was forced back. Ino quickly got to her feet and put more chakra into her hair. Like it, Sakura? Ino asked. This is the secret art that I made myself. Ino bragged. This is the gap between us. No matter what kind of toys you have, it won't ever be enough, she stated. Leveling off the amount of chakra, the blonde kept a tight hold on her opponent. Now, give up. Gritting her teeth, Sakura pulled hard at Ino's hair, making the girl go lose her footing. It bought enough time for Sakura to pull out a kunai to cut at the blonde locks constricting her. Ino grunted as chakra to part of her hair was severed. She was even more enraged that her hair was now a tiny bit uneven. Sakura tried to make her way to the Kubikiri Haucho. Damn that Ino, Sakura thought to herself as she watched her opponent. She's too fast for me. Every time I try and lift the Zanbetu she catches up. I have to think of something new. She wasn't given any more time to deliberate, however, as Ino pressed her attack once again making Sakura abandon getting to her sword. Punches and kicks were exchanged and Sakura could at the very least keep Ino busy until the other girl brought her hair back into the equation. To Sakura's frustration, it was as if Ino had added another appendage and she was losing ground and stamina at an amazing rate. Once again, Ino showed her superior skills by catching Sakura with an elbow smash that sent her opponent flailing backwards. Sakura hit her sword with a thud and slid down to the ground with Ino looming over her. Are you ready to give up yet, forehead girl? Ino asked in a haughty voice. Sakura felt around behind her until she grasped the lowest end of her sword. Not yet, Ino Buddha. With her last reserves of energy, Sakura pulled forward on the Zanbetu until the blade hit her back. Ino was hit squarely in the head by the long handle of the Kubikiri Haucho as a result. As she stumbled back, Sakura regained the proper hold on her sword and sent it streaking towards Ino's neck. Not wanting to actually kill the other girl, Sakura made sure that the arch in the blade would be the part to actually hit her opponent's neck. Ino, however, was not that easy to subdue. In a flash, her hair had taken on a razor-sharp edge. As she fell with the blade, Ino's foot lashed out and caught Sakura's ankle so that they both fell. Even with her head pinned by the heavy blade, Ino's hair still found its mark and wrapped itself around Sakura's neck. Now, the two genin found themselves in a face-to-face battle of wills. Give up. Both girls demanded in tandem. Ridiculous. I have you, Ino stated as she tensed her hair to drive that point home. With so much chakra in it, she could mold the strands into razor wire should she will it. Sakura returned the favor as she put just a little more weight on the Kubikiri Haucho. The arch pushed into the roof and the bladed inside of the arch pressed into Ino's neck. I think you should submit, Ino, Sakura hissed as she leaned in closer to the captured girl. Ino willed her hair into a series of spikes which dug into Sakura's neck. I don't submit to anyone, Sakura, she hissed back. If you push that blade down I'll draw my hair with it and we both die. As Ino strained upwards against the blade, Sakura pushed down against Ino's hair until the pair were nose to nose. They stared into one another for a few moments until Ino finally decided to stop playing and end the fight even if it meant more injury on her part. Before Sakura could even realize it, the blonde girl's hair lost its dangerous spikes and constricted as a solid mass. The resulting sudden loss of air and blood made Sakura's eyes go wide and for a moment, Ino expected to feel the cold steel of the Zanbetu dig even deeper into her neck. That action never came, though, and a second later Sakura was forced to release the stagnant air in her lungs. With no more air to breath combined with the loss of blood to her brain, the pink-haired girl succumbed to the embrace of unconsciousness. Ino finally let out the breath she had been holding and cut the chakra from her hair. Geez, that was rough, the genin whined as she shifted Sakura's weight. Once Sakura's head and hands were off of her sword, Ino pushed the massive blade away from her neck and winced as it hit the roof with a loud clatter. And this thing weighs a ton. For a moment, Ino gave way to weariness and stayed sprawled out on the rooftop. Although she didn't want to admit it, looking down at Sakura's face laying on her chest, Ino had to admit that she looked peaceful. The look was a far cry from the shinobi Sakura had just shown she could be. You really surprised me, forehead girl, Ino whispered as she brushed a few stray locks of pink hair from Sakura's face. In response, the young girl shifted her head into Ino's hand and the blonde froze. Sakura. Ino, are you done yet? The voice served to snap Ino out of whatever cloud of thoughts she was in and she quickly pushed her former opponent off her body. The sudden jolt didn't wake Sakura, however, as the girl was clearly down for the count. Caught all of that, did you, Shikamaru? Ino asked as she brushed herself off with her back to the boy. Shikamaru shrugged and leapt down from the higher part of the roof he had been watching from. Not by choice, he stated. Looking over the wrecked roof, he whistled in appreciation of the damage. Good thing this was an abandoned building, you and that girl really wrecked it. It was Sakura and that crazy sword of hers, Ino responded. She swings that thing around, tears up half the place, and then calls Mei a wild pig. Ha. For a few moments, Shikamaru waited in silence for his teammate to say something more about the fight. Now that Ino mentioned Sakura's name, the young Nara remembered more about her. He knew Ino and Sakura had been inseparable for years until a bad falling out, but he didn't think it had came to open violence yet. Seeing that Ino wasn't going to give up any details of the altercation willingly, he sighed and pulled out a handkerchief. Ino turned around when she felt Shikamaru tap her shoulder. What's this for? She asked as she took the offered cloth. Your neck, Shika answered. It's bleeding all over the place. In shock, Ino felt her neck and was surprised to find a long, deep cut marring her flesh. As Shikamaru had said, it was bleeding but not enough to be life-threatening. It would leave a scar, however. Forehead girl must have cut it closer than I thought, Ino said as she stunted the bleeding. Shikamaru lazily nodded before he motioned to the other girl on the roof. Well, Sakura didn't get off easy herself. Ino's eyes followed her teammate's finger as he pointed to the still unconscious Sakura. More importantly, the pool of blood under Sakura's neck. Damn it, Ino cursed as she ran over to the other girl. She turned Sakura over and cringed when she saw that her neck was painted red. I put too much chakra into the jutsu. Shikamaru, help me get her to the hospital. The genin ordered as she used the handkerchief Shika had given her to stop Sakura's bleeding. The Nara raised a single eyebrow and looked closer at Sakura's wounds. Ah, Ino, it's not really that bad. Yours is actually worse than that, he pointed out. Just calm down for a second and look at it. Ino blinked and pulled back the cloth. Although there was a lot of blood, the puncture marks weren't that deep and the bleeding had mostly stopped. Still, she had to do something. Shikamaru watched his teammate with a sharper eye as Ino picked up the sleeping Haruno. She was oddly being very gentle despite the war the two of them had just been through. I'm taking her to the hospital, Shikamaru, Ino stated. She eyed the large Zanbedu still resting on the roof before sighing. Grab that sword, would ya? Sakura would get pissed if I just left it out here. This is way too troublesome, Shika mumbled as he strained to pick up the weapon. How does she manage to even hold this thing upright? He wondered. The blade was taller than he was and probably weighed close to 80 pounds. Ino shrugged as she leapt to the nearest rooftop. Who knows, it's probably some sort of strange forehead power. Let's just get to the hospital. Silently, Kakashi watched as his student was carried off. Before Shikamaru had made himself known, the Junin had almost intervened himself to make sure Sakura had gotten to a hospital. However, this had proven unnecessary as Ino had been much more sportsmanlike than he had given her credit. From the way Asuma talked, Kakashi would have had pegged her as a girl with a dominatrix complex who cared far too much about her appearance. It was probably just old memories catching up with her, though, Kakashi mused. Despite what most people would think, the man watching the unfolding scene below him was very familiar with memories. It could be a problem for Ino during the exams. Deciding it would be best to make sure Sakura got decent treatment and to put the Kubikiri Haucho back into a scroll, Kakashi subtly followed the duo. After all, the staff on duty wouldn't let something like that Zanbedu just sit out in a hospital. Ino made it to the hospital first while Shikamaru was several minutes behind her thanks to the speed she had used getting to the second most important building in Konoha. The nurses on duty rushed to take Sakura from Ino, having reacted to the large amount of blood on the girl. Most of the blood, however, was Ino's own that had dripped onto Sakura during the trip. To the blonde's annoyance, one of the doctors on duty caught this fact and had promptly admitted Ino into the hospital despite her protests. That was why the youngest Yamanaka now found herself in a drab medical gown and confined to a bed for observation. It's not that bad, Ino, Shikamaru stated as he leaned back in the chair he was in. Think about it, you have an excuse to just lay back and take it easy now. Ino crossed her arms in a huff. Not all of us are lazy good for nothings like you are, Shika, she responded. I mean, I should be out of here by now. What are my parents going to think? I just ran out of the shop earlier. Shikamaru shrugged. Who knows? Your dad was the one who sent me off to find you in the first place. It was so troublesome. So that's why you were lurking around and following me, Ino deduced. Still, her lazy teammate did have a point. A nice break after a fight like that would be nice. What the hell, I deserve it, she finally decided with a smirk. The boy returned the smirk and rose from his chair. If that's the case, I'll go explain things to your parents. How does a training accident sound? Ino laughed. That'll work, I guess. If anyone can outsmart Pops, it's you. A groan from the bed adjacent to Ino's drew the attention of the pair. Dressed in a matching hospital robe, Sakura grunted as she finally awoke from her stupor. There was an awkward tension in the air as Ino and Sakura locked gazes, neither knowing exactly what to say or do. Noticing the tension and deciding it was becoming too troublesome for him, Shikamaru quickly said his goodbyes and left. So, you're in here, too. Sakura started. Yeah, I must have been sloppy, Ino finished with a humorless laugh. Again, Sakura spoke first. How did we get here? She asked. For sure, she couldn't have brought herself after that fight. Ino considered lying. It would be easier to just forget this entire day, except for Haku, but she knew Sakura wouldn't give up that easily. I brought you here, Sakura, the blonde admitted with a sigh. Why? That single question brought up more responses than Ino cared to think about. What had compelled her to bring Sakura, the girl who had practically ambushed her, to a hospital? Guilt. Lingering feelings from their days as best friends. Something else entirely. I don't know. I just didn't want to see you like that, Ino finally, and honestly, responded. Sakura slowly nodded. I know what you mean, she said. At Ino's confused look, the girl continued. On the roof, I mean. I could have killed you, you know. But, I didn't want to. I don't hate you, Ino. The mutual confessions brought about a more pensive silence. Both girls had something significant to think about and neither really wanted to. In Ino's mind, nothing had been resolved. Sakura had still betrayed her all those years ago and, to be honest, she had never really given her old rival much thought since her new training with Naruto. Today, however, had shown her that Sakura not only still thought of her, but had put significant effort into catching up. To Sakura, the day out with Ino as Haku, followed by the fight and revelations before it had shifted her view of her old friend. What was more, the talk before the battle had brought up many issues and feelings she didn't want to think about. Sakura's entire perception of Yamanaka Ino's place in her life had shifted in less than 10 minutes of talking. What it had shifted into was still up in the air, though. Ino. Sakura began, tired of the silence. The pink-haired genin didn't get a chance to say anything more as the room's door opened and a nurse came in. Not noticing the mood, the cheerful woman walked over to Ino's bed pushing a wheelchair. Yamanaka-san, our tests and X-rays are back in, she stated. Nothing serious came up so you're free to go. Just take it easy with the bandage on your neck, alright? Your parents are also in the lobby, I believe. Ino, stunned by the sudden door to freedom, only nodded. She gathered up her clothes which the nurse had brought with her and climbed into the mandatory wheelchair. As the nurse wheeled Ino out of the room, Sakura bit her lip. Ino, she called out right as the door was about to shut. There was a pause and Sakura thought her former friend might not have heard her. The door, however, opened back up and Ino stuck her head back inside the room. Yeah, she called back, sounding as sheepish as Sakura did. Sakura didn't know what to say exactly, only that her brain wanted her to say something. See you in the Chunin exams. Ino let out a breath of air which Sakura noted sounded like a sigh of relief. I'll be looking forward to it. Forehead girl. With that, Ino left a stunned Sakura alone in her room. Kakashi, who had been waiting in the lobby casually reading his porno, watched as Ino talked with her parents. Apparently, someone had told them it was a training accident. While the Anbu would file a report on the incident, it probably wouldn't be marked as anything more than inter-village rivalries flaring up before the Chunin exam. Once he got Sakura's room number from the nurse, the Junin meandered down the hall. When he opened the door, he was met with the sight of his student looking strangely contemplative. Sakura, are you in here? He called out. The genin blinked a few times and looked up at her teacher. Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing here? She asked. Kakashi smiled under his mask and leaned up against the wall. Well, I was just walking along and this talking black cat crossed my path. Funny thing, it led me right here. Sakura rolled her eyes but the lie made her smile. Sure, sensei, she laughed. At least Kakashi could always lighten the mood. So, when are you getting out of here? The Junin asked. By the look of her, Sakura didn't have many injuries other than her neck and a few bruises on her face. The young girl shrugged. I just woke up a little while ago and there hasn't been anyone in to talk to me yet, Sakura responded. She left out the part about Ino since that was something she didn't want floating around Konoha. Kakashi nodded in understanding. They can be a bit slow here. No head director over the hospital, you know, he stated. Figuring it was as good a time as any, he pulled out a small scroll from his pouch and laid it down on Sakura's bed. Sakura looked at the rolled up piece of paper and let out a sigh of relief. The Kubikiri Houcho, she exclaimed as she held the scroll. Thanks for picking it up, Kakashi-sensei. Oh, that wasn't me, the Junin responded as he flipped a page in his book. Ino was the one who suggested that Nara kid bring it along. I just picked it up off him in the lobby. The thought brought a small smile to Sakura's face. Ino had not only brought her to a hospital, but had made sure her weapon came along with her. Still, it could just be that Ino felt pity for her former friend. She still doesn't take me seriously, I guess. Sakura thought to herself as he gripped the scroll tightly. It was easy for Kakashi to feel the small bit of depression coming off from his student. Although he didn't know the reason for it, he suspected it had to do with her fight with Ino. I saw your fight, the masked man stated, pulling Sakura out of her brooding. And I think I saw some room for improvement. Sakura let out a humorless chuckle. You think? She sarcastically responded. Ino dominated the entire thing, I only got lucky when she underestimated me at the end. Kakashi sighed. This wasn't going to be easy. If he didn't know better, he would have thought Sakura had picked up a few of Sasuke's attitude. You knew you couldn't beat Ino right now, so don't get discouraged, Kakashi said. You did remarkably well for only a few days' practice with that sword and you got in some hits. After all, Ino was in here too. I know, sensei, Sakura said with a disappointed sigh. But I can hardly lift the Kubikiri Haucho, it's going to cause more problems during the exam if I use it. At those words, the Junin chuckled. Sakura, you're the smartest ninja that's graduated this year and you can't appraise a battle. He asked with a quirked eyebrow. I said there was room for improvement and there is. Sakura looked up at her teacher with a thoughtful expression. She hadn't thought of it like that. What do you mean, Kakashi-sensei? The only times I managed to hit Ino was with my fists or when I caught her off guard, Sakura stated, not understanding what the older man was driving at. Exactly, Kakashi said, closing his book. He reached back into pouch and pulled out another scroll. One hand seal and a plume of smoke later, it was laid out in front of Sakura. To finish, the Junin produced a pen and a bottle of ink which he placed on the table beside Sakura's bed. The young Haruno looked at the black scroll in confusion. What's all this for? She asked. Instead of immediately answering, Kakashi picked up Sakura's medical chart from the end of the hospital bed. You get working on that and I'll go see a nurse about your condition, he stated as he walked out the door. Sensei. Sakura called out, what am I supposed to do with all this? You said I could improve with the Zanbeitu. She yelled in frustration. Kakashi smiled at annoying. You're being stupid. Smile at his student. And how do you expect to get better with it? He asked. Like you said, you're not strong enough to use it like it was intended, so what should you do? You think Zabuza just listened to someone else when he was learning? Kakashi added. Trial and error. Sakura, trial and error. You already have a fight to draw experience from. Look underneath the underneath and you'll figure it out. Sakura frowned as Kakashi walked out of the room, leaving her without only blank paper and questions. Some teacher he is, she huffed. Still, she would give figuring out what to do a chance since there was nothing better to occupy herself with. First, Sakura examined the scroll itself. There were not words on it at all, but there was ample space to fill some in herself. Their long parchment was even broken up into sections, so Sakura imagined it would be something like a list or different parts of a whole. But what would come in parts? She wondered. Suddenly, she remembered something like this from her days studying for the academy's final exam. Of course, a technique scroll. This is a blank one, though. Does Kakashi want me to fill it in? Sakura asked herself. Shrugging, Sakura grabbed the pen and started thinking about her fight with Ino. Some things had definitely worked and some things hadn't. Actually using the Kubikiri Haucho the way she had planned seemed to be out of the question. A faster opponent than Ino would have ample time to counter any attack. Then what do I do with it? Sakura asked herself. Without the sword, she was basically back to square one in her training. Calm down, there has to be something I'm missing, the young girl told herself. With that thought in mind, Sakura started writing out things that had worked against Ino on the scroll. Obviously, the first thing she described with Zabuza's maneuver of using the Zanbeitu as a springboard for a kick after a failed slash. Next, Sakura outlined using the weapon handle for strikes should the situation allow. More and more, Sakura wrote about unorthodox uses of the sword and more did a pattern develop. I used the Kubikiri Haucho like a part of the battlefield itself, Sakura gasped in a sudden bout of insight. That makes sense since it's so big. There's no way that I could swing it like Zabuza no matter how much I train, so, I have to do something different. Outside in the hall, looking through the slightly ajar door, Kakashi smiled under his mask. Finally got it, huh? He silently mused. Maybe there's more to the genius of hard work thing that Guy was talking about than I gave him credit. Kakashi wondered. Then again, Guy was a person who ran around in green spandex sporting a bowl cut. Nah, Kakashi decided as he pulled back out his Ika Ika Paradise book and went in search of a doctor on duty. All around Konoha young men and women streamed from their homes. Their parents, standing in the doorways, watching as their children walked away, were afflicted with conflicting feelings. On the one hand, there was pride. The pride that their child was becoming an adult. On the other, there was fear. Fear for their safety. These feelings were repeated time and time again over the city. That was because of one thing. One event. The only time when all of Konoha came alive for a few weeks. It was already starting. Shops were advertising special sales and street vendors were setting up their stalls. The Chunin exams. It was always a sight to behold for the general populace. The Junin exams were held in private, so this was as close as a normal person got to seeing a live ninja mission, so it was a show for many. This year there were several prestigious clans that were probably going to be competing against each other in the finals. Hyuga Hinata, heir to the entire clan, along with her talented cousin, would be representing their family. Even more, the pride of Konoha, Uchiha Sasuke, would sure to be a shoe-in for Chunin. Along with these geniuses, high-ranking clans like the Inuzuka and Akamichi had their newest generation in Genin teams. A nice show indeed. However, before any Genin could entire the preliminary rounds, they first had to be cleared by their Junin instructors. Many Junins, such as Might Guy, choose to skip a year before letting their pupils take the exam to let them hone their skills. This was not the case, though, with the Rookie 9, or so some in Konoha had begun calling the recent graduates, and it was rumored that all of them had been recommended for the exams. Can you believe all this? Naruto raved to his teammates as they walked the city, listening to the ordinary people gossip and brag about the class below them. Yes, the rookies were the talk of the town, much to the annoyance of the more seasoned shinobi who had skipped an exam or had failed before. Tenten, ever diplomatic, tried to frown at her friend's words. That was hard to do, though, when her own feelings were inclined the same way. Let the people talk, she stated. Yosh. They will have even more to talk about when their picks are eliminated by Team 2. Lee declared in one of his rare boastful moments. Naruto gave him a grin and actually pumped his fist along with his teammate. Hell yeah, rookies are no problem at all for the likes of us, Naruto stated. The trio was headed for the old ninja academy for their first round of questioning. It was still early, only 2 o'clock, and they had an hour to get there, so they were taking the long way around the village. When they were out of the more crowded areas, Tenten innocently put her hands behind her head and looked at her 2 teammates. So, you guys train hard for this thing? She asked, trying not to sound too suspicious. To the bone, Naruto instantly replied. Then, looking at Lee's bandaged hands, he flinched. Probably not as hard as Lee did, though, the boy amended. For once the innocent Genin smiled at his own accomplishments. It had come at a cost, though, Lee mused, and his mood shifted into a sad one. While their individual skills were most likely at their peak, their team dynamic had suffered. They hadn't done a mission together since Naruto's kidnapping, mostly going off by themselves to train. For the first time in a long time, Lee felt he didn't completely know the 2 people walking next to him. What if all 3 of them didn't become Chunin? Would they even be on the same team anymore? Thoughts like these had been plaguing his mind recently. So caught up in his thoughts was Lee that he almost missed Tenten's response of, yeah, Lee really pulled out all the stops with that training. Guy-sensei didn't make you do too much, right? She asked Lee. That log thing was pretty rough. The slightly older boy shook his head. The training was very rewarding. The simplicity of the answer took Naruto and Tenten by surprise. You alright, Lee? Naruto asked. His green inclined friend seemed a bit down, which was unusual. Normally the other boy would be spouting things about youthfulness or Guy's latest win over Kakashi. Nodding, Lee tried to focus on the moment and not the future. Shinobi, Guy had said once, do not have the luxury of a future and can only live in the moment. That in mind, the current moment was looking grand, so it wasn't hard for Lee's mood to improve. Tenten smiled at her 2 best friends. She had an idea what was wrong with Lee but kept silent. Things would work out, they always did. At least, she hoped it would this time. Of course it will, she said aloud, drawing the attention of her friends, we're the best. All 3 of us will make Chunin and be a team until we're too old to even walk. Then, after we're retired or Hokages, our kids will be put in the same team so they don't break the Amaucha Rock Trio. She exclaimed, throwing a fist up to the sky. Lee's eyes lit up as Tenten reaffirmed his sentiments. Yush. Of course they will. Our names will go down in history. The boy yelled as his fist also flew up once again. The excitement was infectious. With a face-splitting grin, Naruto let his hand join theirs. We're the big sharks in a small pond, of course we'll all make Chunin. It's a given, they might as well hand us our vests now. My. I doubt the village has any vests that could accommodate those swollen heads of yours. Team 2 wheeled around at the snide comment only to find a grinning Hyuga Hinata staring back at them. Team 8, which included Aburame Shino and Inuzuka Kiba, flanked the future clan leader. Shino, the most level-headed of the group, chose to stand off to the side rather than get caught up in pre-exam pissing matches. Hinata and Kiba, on the other hand, took to the festivities like proverbial fish. You guys don't stand a chance, Kiba remarked. From atop of his head, Akamaru barked to agree with his master. I mean, your sensei didn't recommend you the first time, obviously something's wrong with you guys. Just go on home and wait until the decent ninja are out of the running. Naruto simply scoffed at the group, he'd screw with them later during the exam. Seeing as they had arrived at the building that was housing the first part of the exam, he walked on inside with Lee. Don't you have a fire hydrant to deface, dog breath? Don't let us keep you from that, Tenten spat as she followed the rest of her team inside. She couldn't help but laugh when she heard Hinata unsuccessfully hold back a laugh, though. Inside, things were far more hectic. There were several genin lounging about, talking in hushed voices, or actually getting in some last-minute sleep. When she walked in, Tenten noticed the rest of her team off in a corner trying not to attract too much attention. When they were all together, Lee raised his index finger and Tenten knew that a lecture was sure to follow. I was just telling Naruto-kun about a strategy Guy-sensei suggested. He said, we shouldn't draw attention to ourselves. If we do, we'll be a target. Naruto nodded. That's pretty good thinking for super thick eyebrows. I really don't want to be singled out this early. Don't you think so, Tenten? The girl agreed as well. It would be best if they acted like clueless genin to fool all the foreign ninjas stalking around. That decided, they joined the general shuffle of bodies up the first flight of steps until they reached a stopping point in front of a door marked 301. There were two particularly strong-looking teenagers guarding it and several of the other genin were beaten up. This is nuts. One of them shouted near the front. You can't hold us here, this is an official exam. The taller boy, one with spiky hair and a bandage over his nose, chuckled. Stop whining. We're doing you a favor by stopping you guys here. Naruto listened to the display with disinterest. The competition had to be pretty stupid if they couldn't tell it was a genjutsu. Hell, if they only walked up one flight of stairs, how could they be on the third damn floor? Come on guys, let's get out of here, Tenten said as she walked past the angry group of genin. Obviously she had noticed it as well and Naruto had no problem following orders. When Lee paused for a moment, however, they both stopped. Looking over to his left for just a moment, the bowl-cut boy took a deep breath and marched into the crowd to get to the two people blocking the fake entrance. Where do you think you're going? The shorter teen asked, his fist clenched. You should move, Lee replied, not giving an inch. Again he looked over into the crowd but because of all the people Naruto and Tenten couldn't see what had caught his attention without moving. Once they did, the reason became all too clear. Standing over to the side watching was none other than Team 7. In particular, Haruno Sakura. With a groan, Tenten's brain made the connection. Nudging Naruto with her elbow, she leaned in to whisper, I think it's love at first sight. That's Team 7 over there and that pink-haired genin caught Lee's attention. What do we do? Lee's going to blow his plan before we can even begin it at this rate. Naruto whispered back. Before Tenten could answer, there was a loud crack of flesh upon flesh and Lee went down hard on the wood floor. That's what you're bringing to this exam. Pathetic. Being a chunin means being responsible for everyone in your team. You think kids can be trusted with something like that? The spiky-haired teen asked as he tried not to rub his hand. That weird kid was a solid wall of muscle. From the crowd, Uchiha Sasuke strolled out into the limelight and Naruto had to fight the urge to simply laugh at how cool his cousin was trying to be. I understand, Sasuke said, but you will let me through. You'll also remove this genjutsu you've put over the door. Evidently, other than Team 2 and 7, no one else had bothered to count how many floors up they were traveling and were shocked when the 301 morphed into 201. Tenten wondered how the majority of them remembered how to breath. Hey, you noticed it too, Uchiha? Neji asked as he also stepped out from the crowd. I hope it wasn't a strain on your limited senses. For a moment it looked as if the two were about to come to blows until the brains of Team 7 stepped between them, again knocking over Lee in the process. He had tried to jump between them to try to recover some of his damaged image but Sakura's foot had other plans. Looking at her, one wouldn't think that Haruno Sakura would be able to stare down two of the most dangerous shinobi in the exam but the young genin was attempting to do just that. You two can beat the hell out of each other after the exam. We all knew it was a genjutsu, so let's go. Okay, Sasuke-kun, Neji, she reasoned. With a smirk, the pale-eyed Hyuga shrugged and pushed past the stunned crowd towards the stairs at the other end of the hall while Sasuke and Sakura lagged behind. They didn't want to be around Neji when he was in one of his smug moods, anyway. As the crowd started to disperse and follow, Tenten walked over to her green-clad teammate and helped him up off the floor. Geez, Lee, you got pushed around a bit, huh? Luckily for Lee, the only thing bruised was his ego and he only had to dust himself off to look fixed and fit once again. I was kicked in the head. That didn't make me look cool, he lamented. Come on, Sakura's brainwashed for Sasuke, Naruto stated. She probably walks into fence posts when he's not around. Lee, however, didn't see it this way and he shook his head. That is not so. I can tell she's special. He informed them. I'll protect her until death. Shrugging to one another, Tenten and Naruto dragged Lee along with them to the third floor. It was there that they saw Team 7 getting some last-minute pointers from their Junin sensei. That is to say, Naruto's uncle. Otoji, are you supposed to be in here? Naruto asked with a smirk as the trio walked up to the exam room entrance. If Kakashi was worried about being reprimanded for the pep talk, he didn't show it as he lazily smiled at his nephew. Just wrapping up some things, he said in way of explanation. Sasuke and Neji eyed the group, but weren't overly hostile. The only kunoichi on the team was another story, however. Sakura rolled her eyes. How could she forget that her teacher was that kid's uncle? Not wanting to be around the blonde for any length, she pushed past her teammates without so much as a word and entered the exam room. She knew it was childish, maybe even bitchy, but Sakura really didn't care. Kakashi watched the kunoichi head off with slightly narrowed eyes. He had noticed the problem Sakura seemed to have with his nephew the first time he had brought it up, but was getting worse. Ah, well, you guys better get in there before Sakura wipes out all the competition, he said, trying to lighten the mood. Naruto, as always, was oblivious to the tension and nodded. Whatever, he responded. You're buying me ramen when I pass, though. Don't try and weasel out of it. Inside the large exam room, numerous genin were already finding their seats. Off to the side, Naruto spotted Hinata, Kiba, and Shino talking to one another along with Team 7. Looks like most of the rookies were sticking together, the boy noted. Now, where was Sasuke-kun? Ah, there she was. Ino practically leapt at the stoic Uchiha until Sakura caught her midair and dropped her to the floor. To Naruto's surprise, she even did it one-handed. Maybe she wasn't as useless as he had originally thought. Pig, don't act so desperate, Sakura groaned. Her voice lacked any real reprimand, though, and there was obviously tension hanging between the pair. Ino opened her mouth to say something, but someone else caught her eye. Having nothing better to do, Choji and Shikamaru followed along as their leader waltzed over to Team 2. Naruto, Ino called out as her own way of greeting. She gave Tenten and Lee a courtesy nod, which the boy returned with gusto while Tenten rolled her eyes. Ignoring them, Ino continued, "You ready to finally lose to me?" "Hey, I taught you everything you know," Naruto responded, just as smug. "You're unlucky that guy didn't want us to skip this year." Over with the main group, Sakura's eyes were narrowing at her rivals. Banter. They seemed to be getting along well, she noted. Nothing like how awkward things between Ino and herself were at the moment. Normally, Sasuke would ignore any and all fangirls for fear of them getting even more attached, but Sakura was seriously starting to beat him in the brooding department at the moment, and it was weirding him out. Contrary to popular thought, Uchiha Sasuke did have a personality, and there were times he felt like giving a damn. When your other teammate was a Hyuga who was glaring a hole in his relative, it didn't leave a lot of options on who to open a conversation with. If looks could kill, I'd have two fewer annoyances to worry about in this exam, Sasuke lazily commented. He didn't want to look too eager to talk and ruin his stoic reputation. That snapped Sakura out of her glaring, and she looked anywhere but at the two people standing across the room from her. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sasuke-kun." The raven-haired boy scoffed in his usual gruntial fashion as he leaned up against the wall. "Whatever," Sasuke replied, giving up on his attempt at communication. Unfortunately, someone else didn't get that memo. "You rookies sure are being noisy." The rebuke caught the attention of Naruto and Ino and stopped their conversation cold. The more high-strung members of the Rookie Nine took a special offense. Hinata inclined her head as a lanky teen walked over from the throng of other genin. "Who are you to talk to us like this?" she demanded. "I'm Yakushi Kabuto, and I've been through this thing enough times to know you don't want to make these guys mad before the exam," he explained. Naruto, while a bit irked at the attitude the older boy was sporting, didn't take too much offense and remained neutral. Sakura, on the other hand, relaxed and tried to pry some information out of their nosy guest. "Kabuto-san, you've been through the exam before?" she asked. At least Kabuto's interruption had made Ino and Naruto pry themselves away from one another. The bespectacled genin chuckled, but the sound came out quite hollow. "I've taken this exam 7 times already. That's 4 years of doing this thing," he responded. Naruto was shocked. 7 times this guy had gone through the Chunin exam. He didn't look particularly weak, so maybe this exam was a lot harder than he was thinking. Looking at his team, they all mirrored similar feelings. Even Ino looked disconcerted. Kabuto must have noticed the funk as he made an easing gesture with his hands. "But that's just me, you guys might do better, with a little help," Kabuto stated as he pulled out a stack of cards. "These are the results of taking this test so many times, my ninja info cards. They hold all kinds of information, over 200 of them in all." "Do you have individual people on there?" Sasuke suddenly asked. When Kabuto nodded, he added, "Show me Gaara of Hidden Sand." With a flash of chakra, one of the older genin's cards popped to life and a miniature mock-up of a strange-looking boy showed up. "Sabaku no Gaara. Genin," Kabuto read aloud. "Completed 8 C rank missions and AB rank, pretty impressive." Sasuke nodded as his way of showing thanks before sulking off to lean against the wall. Obviously the news disturbed him a bit. "Say, do you have one for me?" Sakura reluctantly asked. "I mean, we should see how much info everyone else might have," she amended. Kabuto nodded and pulled out another card from his stack. Once a bit of chakra was applied, a portrait of Sakura popped up along with a stat window. Naruto noticed that Ino was paying just a bit more attention this time around. Haruno Sakura, Genin. Completed 6D rank missions and, wow, 1A rank. Kabuto exclaimed, much to the surprise of everyone else. Former abilities were limited, but recent training makes you a dark horse in this exam. Ino whistled. So Asuma wasn't just blowing steam when he said your team fought that missing nin, huh? She asked Sakura. Off to the side, Lee made a point of smiling smugly at Tenten. I am a most youthful judge of character, he said in an I told you so tone. All Tenten could do is grit her teeth and nod. So, what kind of villages are in the exam this year? Anyone good? Hinata asked. I noticed one symbol I had never seen before. That must have been Oto, Kabuto answered. Another card was pulled out of the stack and a small map appeared on it. Otogakure, a minor village that was just founded in Tea Country, sent a genin team. It's probably all they have. It was at that point the most perceptive members of the group noticed something off. From the mass of people, 3 shapes came barreling out towards Kabuto. Sakura, being closest, quickly pulled a kunai and knocked away 2 other kunai that were flung at the teen. When a second figure came in low, however, the pink-haired girl missed seeing them. Just when she was about to get hit, an impossibly long lash of gold hair whipped through the air and nearly caught the attacking Oto nin. While Ino wasn't particularly serious, her odd attack proved to be enough to make the mummy-looking genin veer off course and reevaluate the situation. You brats settle down back there. The first exam is about to begin. A deep voice bellowed. A mass of smoke near the front of the room and let everyone know just what was happening. Several vicious-looking shinobi stepped out of the mass Shunshin no Jutsu and glared at the terrified genins. Their leader, who Naruto instantly recognized, looked at the back with a stern gaze. You sound guys better calm down or I'll personally kick your ass out of this exam, he warned. When he saw Naruto at the back grinning at him, it sent a shiver down his spine. He had never really gotten over waking up in a bed full of snakes last year. Regardless, things quickly picked up from that point. The teams were broken up and shuffled around the room according to their numbers, and it was to his considerable consternation that Naruto found himself sitting next to Hinata. The young Hyuga was probably still in a foul mood from this morning. Glancing around the room, Naruto tried to find his teammates. Tenten was at the far side of the room with Lee a few rows behind her. At least they got to sit near friendly faces. Hinata glared out of the corner of her eyes at the boy but otherwise ignored him. Instead, she chose to pay attention to Ibiki's explanation of the exam. Listening in as well, Naruto's mind worked to understand the instructions. A written test in a Chunin exam. Since when did Konoha ever do something like that? Still, a test was a test and he had to get everything right if he and his team wanted to continue. As the papers were being handed out, he spared a look back at his teammates. To his surprise, he watched Tenten send a few kunai up to the ceiling almost faster than he could register. Since the Chunin instructors were busy, none of them had caught it. What's she trying to do? Get us docked points? He asked himself. It was obvious that the little mirrors mounted on the kunai were, for one thing, cheating. When Tenten signed some instructions to Lee, Naruto figured the other member of the team was in on it as well and he shook his head. If they got caught, well, he let that thought trail off when a test was slammed down in front of him. Even though he had graduated near the top of his class in most things, bookwork was never a Naruto strongpoint, a fact Anko regularly poked fun at. Even so, the blonde knew enough to see that there was virtually no one, even genin who had been through the exam before, that could answer even half of these questions. That was when he noticed it. All around him he saw kids in the same frame of mind as himself. They were staring blankly at the paper as though it were an alien monster that wanted to suck out their brains. However, 1 or 2 of them were scribbling furiously on their tests and made no motion to hide it. It's like they want everyone to know they're so smart. Bastards, Naruto internally grumbled. A surge of chakra off to his side made him glance at Hinata. The veins around her eyes had bulged and instantly Naruto knew what she was doing. The Byakugan, she's cheating. Indeed, the Hyuga heiress was staring a figurative hole through the smarty pants a few rows down and casually copying his test. Number 18, you've failed. Called out an instructor from the sidelines. The boy in question jumped to his feet and asked how the inspector was sure he had cheated 3 times. All he got for his legitimate question was being overpowered by a mummy-looking Chunin who had his eyes under wraps. Beside him, Hinata made a face and went back to copying the answers to her test. Naruto, on the other hand, decided to play it safe and look over his a few more times in an attempt to answer it. He could imagine that Tenten and Lee had already set their plan in motion and wondered if they would get caught. At the front, Ibiki fought to keep a smile off his face as he noticed both subtle and blatant cheating going on before him. Wire mirrors, eyeballs made of sand, and several blood limits were being used and they were all getting past the Chunin he had picked to preside over the exam. They were the bottom of the barrel, he imagined, if they couldn't even tell there was a puppet sitting in their ranks. Those Sunanin were something else. Then, of course, there were those being failed even as he was thinking all this. They were the idiotic ones who tried such things as looking over someone's shoulder or whispering answers. School kids, really. The nervous boy sitting near the front is the one that caught Ibiki's attention, though. Uzumaki Naruto, Anko's only student and near family. They had an interesting relationship if gossip was to be believed. Still, his performance so far was nothing to write home about. In fact, the kid hadn't done anything at all. He was raised by the Hokage himself, had Kakashi for an uncle, and Anko for a teacher, yet he couldn't figure out this exam. Kind of sad, in Ibiki's opinion. Not worrying about it, he turned his eyes towards an interesting drama going on several rows above Naruto. It would seem that two of the more talked about kunoichi were about to put their wills to the test. Sakura had, admittedly, neglected her studies once out of the academy. She had put much more time in improving abilities that her rival friend would consider amazing or at least interesting. Regardless, for someone as intelligent as her, this test wasn't anything too bad, and she had breezed through questions 1 through 9, only leaving the 10th question vacant. Since her seat was so far up in the room, she was content to sit back and watch people fail for being too obvious with their cheating. Behind her, Ino was doing much the same thing. She knew her two teammates would figure something out without her input. She imagined that Shikamaru could answer anything on the test and would use his Kajimane no Jutsu to help Choji pass. That left her, all the way on the other side of the room, to fend for herself. And fend I will, Ino told herself as she set Sakura in her sights. Her family's signature jutsu really wasn't suited to her combat style, but it had its uses. This happened to be one of them. She was a bit worried about it since she hadn't put in too much practice doing it lately, but hey, what could go wrong? Shintenshin no Jutsu. It was always an odd feeling to be in someone else's body. Everyone's body had a different makeup than her own. Muscles built up in different places, injuries or abnormalities that the subconscious had worked around, or weapons in odd places that could cause harm if she shifted around too much. Very tricky business. Damn, forehead girl, buff enough, Ino thought to herself as she flexed Sakura's arm. She felt that if she hit the desk for all she was worth, she could splinter it. Makes sense, I guess, since she swings that oversized kitchen knife around. Faintly, the blonde could feel Sakura's subconscious fighting her control. It was actually surprisingly strong, something Ino hadn't been expecting. Apparently she had spent too much time appreciating Sakura's body rather than keeping her time limit in mind. Well, maybe not appreciating, scouting. Yeah, that was it. Scouting. With that decided, the girl went back to memorizing her rival's answers. Ibiki shook his head. How could those elite Chunin miss someone's head slamming down on a desk? It was like this almost every time he had to host one of these exams with Anko. She would always take the cream of the crop and he'd be left with the special needs ninja. It wasn't fair. Back in front, Naruto had finally glanced around enough to catch on to the general theme of things. 3 chances to cheat. What self-respecting teacher would do that if they didn't want that sort of thing going on? It didn't help him much, though, since his only means of cheating was useless with Hinata sitting right next to him. Unless. Trying not to look too obvious, Naruto poked his sleeve a few times. After several harsh pokes, a familiar bluish snake poked its head out to glare at the boy. What do you want? Orochi asked, clearly annoyed with being bothered. Naruto, not wanting to get his partner in an even worse mood, held back the verbal snap he usually would have dished out. I need you to go look on some of these tests for me, the boy whispered back. Orochi looked around with as bored a look as he could muster. You want me, the greatest serpent to have ever terrorized the earth, to help you cheat on an exam? The last-ditch effort by Naruto died on the vine as his scaly friend slithered back up his arm, hissing humorously at the current situation. The snake had been acting weird lately, so Naruto didn't care too much. It wasn't worth pushing if he couldn't count on Orochi's help later in the exam by pissing him off now. So, the 10th question would have to be his lifeline. If Naruto tired to use the Sharingan now, not only would Hinata see him and raise all kinds of hell, but Ibiki and half the Chunin of Konoha would know as well. It was still early in the exam to use up that particular trump card. Finally Ibiki glanced at the wall clock and called for the 10th question. When Kankura walked in, he made a snide remark about puppets that made the boy flinch. As if a genin could sneak something like that past him. It's now time to begin the 10th question. He called out, getting everyone's attention. The rules of this are simple. You have a choice whether or not to answer the question. If you don't, you fail. If you do and get it wrong, you lose the chance to ever take this exam again. Instantly Kiba shot up out of his chair. What kind of shit is this? He bellowed. There are people in here that have taken this exam before. That's because I've never hosted this exam before, Ibiki answered. I don't want trash like you making Chunin if you aren't qualified. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. The teams had already been thinned out by the first part of the exam, and this question was the straw that broke the camel's back for a number of people as more and more hands went up to quit the exam. Finally, something dawned on Naruto. He knew enough from spending time with his grandfather that this just wasn't done. You don't have the authority for something like that, Naruto called out. All eyes, including the Chunin examiners, fell on Naruto. He could feel Ibiki's in particular drilling a hole in his head, but that only spurred him on. Only the Hokage, with a majority vote from the village council, can hold back a shinobi from promotion, he recited, enjoying the strangled look the large man up front gave. Naruto still hadn't forgotten the tea. Dates, Ibiki regularly shared with Anko despite his misgivings, so young Uchiha twisted the knife a bit more. And aren't there foreign ninja taking this exam, too? Do you have permission from their cage for something like this, Ibiki-san? Before the interrogations expert could make a jumping leap of death at the annoying little brat smirking at him, one of the Chunin discreetly walked up to the platform. Ibiki-sama, I think the jig is up, he whispered. Quote. Well, the point was to cheat and take a leap of faith. I suppose having that kind of information beforehand is a kind of preparation, the large man grumbled. Oh, he was not happy. Like anyone else was going to quit now. Fine, you all pass. Congratula. It was that tiny spike of chakra that alerted the examiner to an oncoming headache, and he discreetly edged away from the window. The Chunin that he had been talking to, however, was not so fortunate, as a booted foot caught him square in the face as the one and only Mitarashi Anko busted through the glass in full regalia. Don't celebrate just yet, the special Junin cried out as she miraculously unfurled a banner behind her. Of course, she was met with dead silence from the surprised genin. From behind the large banner, Ibiki dared to poke his head out. Read the mood, Anko. The young woman flushed with embarrassment until she counted the number of heads. Turning sharply towards her co-examiner, she chided, you left 26 teams, Ibiki. Way too easy this time. Although she looked upset, Anko managed to sneak her student a smirk, letting him know she was proud that he was still around. Ibiki shrugged. Not my problem. Some loudmouth ruined the surprise for everyone else. PFT, whatever, Naruto mumbled as the groups followed Anko outside. Wasn't my fault that Ibiki didn't think anyone would know that kinda stuff. Right, Tenten. The young girl gave a humorless chuckle. I want to be the first woman Hokage, Naruto. Sure, I knew the examiner couldn't do any of that to us, she answered. When Naruto smiled, she sighed. But I didn't say anything because the fewer people that knew that, the more would quit. Come on, that's less competition. Naruto blinked. That was a point. Still, the boy didn't worry about it too much. The more people in this thing, the more fun we'll have. Lee, you know what I mean, right? Yosh. More chances to prove out youthfulness. Once again, Tenten rolled her eyes. Why her teammates loved to fight so much was beyond her. As she looked at the forest looming before them, however, she couldn't deny that her blood was burning just a bit more than usual. Anko walked out in front of the group and Naruto couldn't help the sour expression that came over his face. Couldn't Anko have worn something a bit more conservative? Half of the male genins were undressing what little she had on with their eyes. This place is kinda creepy, Ino mumbled nearby to her teammates. Not far enough away, though, as Anko turned towards her with a vicious smirk. You'll soon find out why this place is called the Forest of Death, she stated, making several people shiver. Naruto, however, snorted. Trying to scare us, hubby-chan? He asked. It's not going to work, most everyone knows what kind of animals to expect in there. The kunai grazed his cheek before Naruto could even see it. Suddenly, a real fear set in, he had forgotten just how far a Junin was above his level. The cut was fairly deep and, shakily, Naruto turned towards Anko to try and placate her, but there was only a cloud of dust. Don't get yourself killed, Naruto, Anko purred, her lips almost pressed flush against his ear. She had nearly draped herself over him in the time it took for the kunai to cut. I wouldn't want all this wonderful blood to be wasted in the forest. Despite how abjectly terrified he was of Anko at that moment, Naruto couldn't help himself from shuddering when her tongue lapped at his cheek, drinking up the blood there. There was a surge of chakra from behind and Anko whirled around, another kunai sliding from her sleeve. However, she paused when the kunai from before was gently held out to her. Though, at the angle it was at the grass nin holding it could easily change hold and drive it into her neck. Your kunai almost hit my team leader, the genin said in a gruff tone. Actually, he sounded more pissed than anything and Naruto could have sworn the voice sounded just a bit familiar. Anko took back the offered weapon with a lick of her lips, wondering why the killing intent coming off the nin spiked when she drank the last bit of blood on her lips. Thanks, she said, but sneak up on me again and I might not be able to stop myself from spilling your blood as well. The grass nin, who had a spooky-looking mask covering his face, scoffed at the threat and walked back to his teammates. Naruto and Anko both couldn't shake the feeling that they had met the guy before, though. Ino was watching the spectacle off to the side with a frown. That Anko woman was just freaky. How could Naruto like someone like that? Oh well, there were always other fish in the sea. Speaking of which. Hey Sakura, Ino called out. The other girl was standing nearby with her team and Sakura looked over when Ino called her. Where's your friend, Haku, at? Sasuke and Neji immediately looked at their shocked teammate with varying degrees of surprise. Neji, though, was the first to act. Haku, he's Dia. Sakura knew she would pay for slapping her hand over Neji's mouth later, but for now she didn't care. Giving him the best glare she could muster to keep him quiet, she answered, Haku's around, Ino. He's, already taken off for his gate. Yup. Ino raised an eyebrow at Sakura's shaky voice. I didn't see him during the first exam, so I thought he might have dropped out, she mused. When she noticed Sasuke looking at her like she were nuts, Ino quickly said, not that I like him or anything, Sasuke-kun. You're the only one for me, she reassured. Sasuke rolled his eyes and decided that the entire Haku business wasn't worth the hassle of dealing with fangirls, so he stalked off towards Anko to grab one of the release forms she was handing out. Neji, though, gruffly pushed Sakura's hand away. Don't do that again, Haruno, he snarled, forgetting about Ino's question in favor of plotting revenge on his teammate. Once Anko had managed to get everyone to sign a voucher, wouldn't want to get sued, she herded all the kids into the scroll hut where her Chunin assistants, who were several degrees more competent than Ibikis, handed out the heaven and earth scrolls. When Naruto's team entered, Tenten slipped the scroll in with her weapon scrolls. No one would ever think the girl would guard the scroll, she reasoned when Lee asked why she got to hold it. And even if they did, they'd have to go through all of my weapon scrolls to find it and risk opening the scroll. At Gate 41, Team 2's gate, the trio sat with a random Chunin, waiting for the exam to officially start. So, what was that thing with Anko before? Tenten asked. You two looked more freaky than usual when that guy walked up to you. Naruto scratched his head, trying to put the feeling into words. He was weird. Like a bunchin but not. I think Hubby-chan noticed more than I did, though. As the Chunin's wristwatch hit 2:35, the man unlocked the gate. Okay, kids. Go have some fun and try not to get dismembered. Team after team broke into the forest at dead runs. Leaping into trees, shrubs, anything that would felicitate them getting to the tower as quickly as possible without ending up the prey of someone else. Team 2, however, lazily traveled through the trees, not looking for anyone in particular. That was because their leader had a plan. Alright, we're all clear on this, right? Tenten asked. We wait until tonight and grab a scroll from a team that's asleep. No problem at all. Naruto, you smell anything yet? Naruto grumbled as he forced more chakra into his nose to increase its performance. It was an Inuzuka technique that Kakashi had taught him a few months ago. Even thought he was only half Inuzuka, it worked well enough that the boy could zero in on the closest team and tell how far away they were. Most everyone around us is moving straight towards the tower, he responded. Taking another deep breath, he added, Team 8 has stopped, though. Tenten's eyebrows knitted as she tried to figure this out. What do you think, Lee? She asked. A trap. They could be ambushing another team already. He deduced. With Shino and Kiba it's possible, Naruto added. Kiba's a lot better at this stuff than I am. The young girl turned on her teammate with a reproachful look. Uchiha or not, we don't need one right now. We need an Inuzuka, she stated. We have to survive and you're the closest thing to a scout we have. Taking the criticism to heart, Naruto tried to push up his senses. Tenten was right, he had never taken his Inuzuka skills seriously other than his taijutsu style. Even that was being pushed back thanks to the Sharingan's abilities. This is pathetic, Naruto told himself. My mother was an Inuzuka, what would she say? The Uchiha blood wished to simply take over everything. As much a part of him as it was, there was more to Uzumaki Naruto than just those red eyes and it was time he used it. Pushing back the chakra of the Sharingan, of the Uchiha, Naruto tried to focus solely on that instinct he had felt every time he would use the Shikyaku no Jutsu. That primal, suffocating urge to run, to feel, to act like a simpler form of life that lives purely on instinct. With a snap, things came into a sharper focus. The trees, the sounds, the smells, everything. Team 7 is fighting a Kusa-nin that way. Naruto pointed to another direction. One of them is coming this way while the other is hanging around the first. Maybe he has the scroll and was sent off to avoid capture, Tenten suggested. Alright, I know this isn't in our original plan, but we're going to capture that guy. Everyone hide. As the group leapt into the trees, Naruto had to wonder who that Kusa-nin was if he could hold off all of Team 7 by himself. He must be a monster. Several hundred yards away, Team 7 was fighting for their very survival. It had only been a few hours into the exam until they had run into this freak of a Kusa-nin. Sasuke-kun, your eyes are amazing, the man stated as an impossibly long tongue flicked out of his mouth. The poor boy actually shivered. It wasn't every day that someone other than his fangirls looked at him like a piece of meat. The Kusa-nin hardly batted an eye as a kunai whizzed by his head. But your teammates seem to be less than accommodating. Sakura pulled out another kunai and sent it sailing towards the strange shinobi with much the same results. It was galling to say the least. What the hell are you? She shouted, trying to divert attention from Neji. Several moments before the ambush, Neji had warned his team and taken off to get the drop on the ambushers. With that knowledge, Sakura and Sasuke had developed a quick plan based on keeping any and all attention on themselves. However, their plan was quickly derailed when Neji dropped from the trees above. The Kusa-nin caught Neji's arms in one hand, stopping him with inhuman strength. Hyuga, I see those eyes are as good as ever. Neji let out a yell when the lanky man deftly tossed him by the arms into a tree. The force was enough that the pale boy coughed up a few drops of blood as he slumped down onto a branch. He didn't rise. Sasuke's eyes burned upon seeing the savage display and he launched a reckless attack at the smirking man. Projectile after projectile was launched at the man until, finally, one of them caught the Kusa-nin in the mouth. It was only a matter of pulling the wire taunt and launching a quick Kaden to nuke his face. Coo 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 coo. The two remaining members of Team 7 looked up at the laughing man who was in quite good spirits for having half of his face burnt off. Like a snake shedding, flakes of skin were falling off, revealing the most piercing eye either genin had ever witnessed. It focused on them and made Sasuke and Sakura feel like cornered mice. Their muscles locked up, their breathing hitched, and Sasuke felt his hair standing on end. It was terrifying. Excellent. I sense more potential in you than even Itachi, the strange ninja stated. Although Sakura didn't know who Itachi was, obviously the name held significance for Sasuke as he stopped struggling. I would give you a going-away present, but there's really no need. The way the man laughed made it seem like everyone was in a joke but them. Why you? What do you know about it, Itachi? Again, the ninja turned around slowly with that same creepy chuckle. When the time comes, find me and I might tell you, Sasuke-kun. With that, the paralyzing fear was gone, along with the mysterious attacker. Walking idly along in the forest of death, the second member of the Kusa team was wasting time. However, something wasn't right with this man. No, not right at all. You guys all sweat like pigs, the head part of the Kusa-nin stated, its voice sounding oddly feminine yet rough. If I don't get out of this damn forest, I'm going to skin someone alive. The legs were obviously not having that great of a time as they mumbled, you think that's bad? We have to deal with you on the rag. Of course, the legs got punched savagely for that one. In the nearby trees, Naruto, Tenten, and Lee watched this strange action with varying degrees of disbelief. Oh well, a crazy ninja would probably be easier to deal with than a sane one. Naruto couldn't shake the feeling he knew that first voice from somewhere before, though. Despite his arguing with himself, the Kusa-nin deftly dodged the hail of kunai aimed at him and continued to dance around. Another barrage, this time coming from the opposite direction, fared about the same. Nice try. The grass nin called out in his former, deep voice. You almost got me. Naruto and Tenten jumped out of the trees on either side of the genin. Give up your scroll before you get hurt, Tenten ordered. However, the attention of the Kusa-nin was not on her. Instead, Naruto found himself in a staring match with the mask-wearing ninja. Now that he was close, the feeling of familiarity was even harder to ignore than before. Who are you? Naruto demanded. Something about this ninja seriously threw him off balance. Catch me and find out, the teen replied before moving to leap off. However, he was caught unprepared as Lee was closing in on him from behind. The green beast had been waiting for a signal from Tenten to spring his part of the ambush. When Naruto distracted the ninja, that signal had been given. The hard haymaker would have completely laid out the Kusa-nin, if he hadn't have split himself apart. The top half sailed over Lee's arm while the bottom part ducked. Naruto watched in awe as the clothes were pushed off the top half of the body along with the face of the teen. Remaining was nothing but the red eyes of a face he knew staring back at him. To Yuya. The boy yelled as the lithe female jumped onto the side of a nearby tree. The other half of the former Kusa-nin shed its skin to become a pale boy in matching robes. The white-haired boy cracked his neck a few times and haughtily looked at the group before him. Trash like you got through our disguise. We'll never hear the end of this, he moaned. To Yuya, who had until now been watching Naruto's reaction, spared a glance at her teammate. Shut the hell up, fag. Split up and loose these bastards. When the redhead made a break for the trees, Naruto quickly followed, leaving his team to catch up with the single enemy. Thoughts were running through his mind about why the Oto Nin was in this exam in the first place. At least now he knew why the Kusa-nin had felt so familiar, though. Get lost. Chiyuya called back as she tossed a kunai at her pursuer. Naruto dodged the pointy implement of death and threw one of his own which was likewise deflected by the girl's flute. Not a chance, he answered. Suddenly, Naruto lost the girl in the deep foliage. 1 minute she was there, the next she wasn't. As he reached the spot where he has lost her, the boy was too wrapped up in looking ahead to dodge the powerful kick that caught him on the head. Tayuya gingerly dropped down from the branch she had swung up into and followed up her ambush with several hard strikes to the boy's chest. Her fists landed with enough force that she felt the air rushing out of Naruto's lungs. Using what little air he had left, Naruto pushed himself off the branch he was sitting on into the air to get away from the assault. Activating his Sharingan, Naruto was determined to get some answers. Rematch time, huh? Tayuya asked as she saw the tone morph into existence. Fine by me, bastard. I owe you a few kicks. What are you doing here? Naruto asked, ignoring Tayuya's hostility. How could he fight the girl? She had practically saved his life. There weren't supposed to be any other sound teams in the exam. Tayuya didn't answer and instead started to play her flute. The haunting melody lanced through the air and wrapped around Naruto like an invisible fog, dulling his senses to the world around him. It was a genjutsu, that much he knew. The lines of chakra were easily visible to his eyes, but despite that he couldn't break it. In the background he could hear Tayuya laughing, but the sound came to his ears as if he were rapidly sinking underwater. Trying to move, the boy found his motor skills to be slow and sluggish no matter how much force he put into his steps. It was a task just to see where he was even putting his feet, and eventually he was completely off balance and lost his grip on the branch. It proved to be too difficult to mold chakra when you couldn't even be sure which way was up. Naruto knew it was bad when his forehead hit a branch on the long way down. It sent his body spinning midair and his feet hit several more branches until he landed hard on the soft undergrowth of the forest of death. Laying there, slipping in and out of consciousness, he was vaguely aware of someone looming over him. Their long hair spilled over his face and their scent filled his nostrils. Listen, the voice said, coming in closer to his ear, don't get your ass killed in this thing. Stay away from the Oto Nins. Shit, just get the hell out of this village. Just as quickly as the voice had came, it left, leaving the boy to finally slip into the sweet embrace of unconsciousness. As she covered the boy's body with leaves to hide him, Tayuya wondered why she decided to let the blonde brat live. This was an extremely important mission, and although the other two had seen her and Sakin, they didn't actually know who they worked for. Naruto, though, could alert someone and maybe tip the leaf off. Still, there was just something about him that put her off balance. His sunny disposition back at the Valley of the End had drawn her just a bit out of the shell firmly placed around her personality, if only for a moment. Looking at her work with a scowl, Tayuya also wondered why she went to this much trouble. She drops him out of a 7-story tree but gives him advice to save his life later along with hiding him. Work was work and extra was extra, she supposed, but it still left a bad taste in her mouth when she repeated it to herself mentally. She had finished hiding the unconscious Naruto just in time as Sakin landed in front of her. Did you lose that kid? He asked, cracking his neck as if being chased by Tenten and Lee hadn't even been a warm-up for him. Tayuya snorted and pushed past her teammate. You don't see him, do you? She asked back. I've been waiting on you to stop playing with that trash and get your fag ass back here. We still have to catch up with Orochimaru-sama. By now, Sakin and the rest of the team, with the exception of Jirobo, had come to ignore Tayuya's mouth. That blonde kid looked familiar, didn't he? He asked. It was on the tip of his tongue, jabbing at his memory. Sakin's words made Tayuya pause for a moment. He did? She asked, trying to sound nonchalant. I didn't notice. Trash is trash and a mission is a mission. If we don't pull this off, who do you think Orochimaru will take it out on? Hey, good point, Sakin granted, and the two Oto Nin sprinted off to find their leader. The redhead did manage to give a Naruto-shaped lump of leaves one last look over her shoulder as they left. She hoped the annoying brat was cognitive enough to have heard her advice, because things were going to get very ugly soon, and there was no way everyone was going to survive.